City Council meetings are held by teleconference only until further notice. Rather than attending in person, a resident should call 805-865-7276 to provide public comment via phone. The phone line will be open just prior to the start of the regular meeting. Or written public comments can be submitted by email to cityclerk@prcity.com prior to 12 noon on the day of the council meeting, to be posted as an addendum to the agenda. If submitting written comments in advance of the meeting, please note the agenda item by name or number. City Council meetings are live streamed, available to play later on YouTube. You can access that by following the link www.prcity.com/YouTube. And with that, this is Mayor Steve Martin. We'll call the meeting to order. I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Councilmember Garcia.
Here.
Councilmember Gregory.
Here.
Councilmember Hammond.
Here.
Councilmember Strong.
Here.
And Mayor Martin.
I'm present. At this time, I'd ask everyone to please mute their microphones, except for Councilman Hammond, if he would please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Join with me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Could we please have introductions of staff present and online tonight?
Darren Nash, City Planner.
Dick McKinley, Public Works.
Julie Dolan, Community Services Director, along with Frida Berman, Maintenance Superintendent, and Cindy Patty, Recreation Staff Assistant.
Caleb Davis, Police Department. Jonathan Stornetta, Fire Chief, along with Randy Harris, Battalion Chief, Scott Hallett, Battalion Chief.
Ryan Cornell, Administrative Services.
Sarah Johnson Rios, Assistant City Manager, joined by Dave McHugh, IT Manager, and Melissa Martin, Deputy City Clerk.
Kimberly Hood, Interim City Attorney.
Tom Fritchie, City Manager, and I believe David Abney, City Engineer, is also on the line.
Very good, thank you. Public comment for our special meeting is going to be limited to the agenda items only. An opportunity will be provided for each agenda item when that item is called. And you've been notified with my previous comments about how to provide public comments. But once again, you may call 805-865-7276. And as usual, on our telephonic meetings, I'll be running the meeting by asking council members in alphabetical order to discuss items. Tonight's rotation will begin with Councilman Gregory. Let's move directly into our first item under discussion, the Salinas Riverbed hazardous fuels reduction. Mr. Stornetta.
Thank you, Mayor Martin, members of the City Council. I'll just pull my PowerPoint show up here. Just confirming you can see it on the full screen there.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So conditions of extreme peril to the safety of our residents and property continue to exist within the city of Paso Robles, caused by the risk of wildland fires in the Riverbed corridor. Last Friday, July 10th, we had the Navajo Fire. The fire started in the Navajo area, and when the 1st Battalion Chief arrived at scene, it was approximately a half an acre. Due to the hot and dry conditions combined with significant vegetation overgrowth in the riverbed, the fire quickly spread. The fire spotted ahead of the main fire and started 2 additional fires on the west side of the river. So it jumped the riverbed and started 2 additional fires. In total, approximately 10 acres burned. Fortunately, no structures were lost and there was no property damage. This fire required assistance from multiple agencies throughout San Luis Obispo County. In total, it took 70 firefighters, 2 dozers, and 3 aircraft to bring the fire under control. The next slide we have here is just the origin. This is GPS coordinates of the fire. You can see where the red X is on the right side of the screen there. That's where the fire originated, so right along those homes. And then it quickly jumped to the left, which is the west there, started a fire in that spot. And then with the ember casting, started a 3rd fire up ahead of that. On June 22nd, 2020, we had the river fire. Again, this fire started in the Navajo area. When the 1st Battalion Chief arrived at scene, the fire was approximately a quarter acre burning in tall grass. The fire started during a multi-day period of very warm and dry weather. Due to the high winds that day, the fire quickly spread and spotted across South River Road, immediately threatening over 60 homes and prompting evacuations. The fire continued to spread up towards the homes on Capitol Hill, then jumped Creston Road and was finally stopped at Union Road. In total, 2 structures were destroyed and 9 buildings were damaged. It took 19 fire engines, 2 hand crews, 2 dozers, 3 air tankers, 1 helicopter to bring that fire under control. At its height, we had 102 firefighters assisting from agencies throughout San Luis Obispo County. And according to our reverse 911 summary, over 6,000 people were called with evacuation information. Here's a picture of that fire. You can see over here where the red X is, the fire initiated in this area, came down the river area, and then jumped across South River Road up into the Capitol Hill area. The fire then moved in a northerly direction. You can see the structure that was lost on fire right here. And then it jumped Creston Road and ultimately ended down here by Union Road. Some great work by our air tankers keeping that fire in check at Union Road here, or we would have expected it to be over here in the Union Road development. So I want to remind our residents too, is we sent out over 6,000 evacuation 6,000 calls for evacuation information. And we noticed that a number of residents didn't evacuate because they didn't think that their homes were in jeopardy on the north side here. And mostly because there's not very much dry vegetation. But I want to remind everyone with this slide here, this is Santa Rosa. As you can see, this development looks similar to the development up on Union Road. And there's no dry vegetation around it. But after the fire went through, you can see every home was lost. So just a reminder to the general public, when we do initiate evacuation information, please follow those orders immediately. This next slide here shows our initial damage assessment of the fire, which we call the river fire, on June 22nd. All of these indicators on here show either homes or buildings that were lost or damaged throughout the fire. This next slide here shows the metrics. Since January 1st, 2017, the fire department has responded to 474 fires within the city limits. Of those, 303 occurred in the riverbed. So we're implementing we're working on a hazardous fuels reduction plan, but this isn't the first one that we've done. In 2019, the Salinas Riverbed, we conducted 85.6 acres of mitigation. The Salinas Riverbed encompasses over 480 acres of dense vegetation, which poses a significant threat to our community. So we just did a minimal amount at 85.6 acres in accordance with regulatory agencies. And you can see highlighted in yellow here are those areas that were mitigated. So approximately about 150 feet off the roadway. And then also we created some fire breaks in there. What we're proposing now is a plan that we submitted to the water board, and it was approved on June 30th. This plan includes mitigating 142 acres and an ongoing routine maintenance plan for 39 additional acres. And the difference between the ongoing maintenance is we're submitting that we don't need a permit to do the ongoing maintenance. The ongoing maintenance sections of our work here will be the pink, or the areas highlighted in pink, and then the green areas are the areas that require some form of a permit. So in the green areas here and also the pink areas, we have masticators and mowers, and we're getting deeper into the Salinas Riverbed corridor. And I'll show you on the following slides how much of that work that we're showing. So a large portion of the riverbed here's 13th Street, and you can see how much further we're going in than we did in the 2019 plan. And then we go further south here, and you can see this is the Coles area, Niblick Road, and we're getting a lot of the vegetation in here that was not captured last time. And then also this is what we're proposing is ongoing routine maintenance moving forward. This slide here just illustrates the dense vegetation down there. So I'm standing there, the grass is taller than I am. This is a lot of star thistles, dry vegetation. This stuff actually just goes up like a Christmas tree. So when our crews are going down there, during the day or at night, they're actually trying to get through this dense vegetation just to get to the fire. So there's lots of hazards associated with that. Once they're down that riverbed, there's always the threat of the ember casting and the fire starting behind them. Well, if it's in the middle of the night and there's no trail system, then it endangers all the public safety personnel in the riverbed because they have no escape route. So they don't know how to get out safely. So what happens is they end up having fire all the way around them. And this continues to be a problem. This slide here illustrates a little bit of the work that we've been doing. You can see the before and after there on the left and right. Here's some more work that took place this week. And then this area here was what had that vegetation about as tall as I was. And this is after Battalion Chief Harris went through with a mower and some public works staff with the masticators to clear those areas. And then Chief Harris actually has a GPS on his tractor that he's working on. So this is how we can track how much abatement work's being done out in the riverbed and seeing what areas still need to be done. So this was as of yesterday of what has been completed thus far. Along with the fire hazards, we do have additional hazards with the encampments down in the riverbed. So an example of that is here you have on your right side, that's actually a toilet and a pit. So that pit's a few feet deep, and in the middle of the night when our firefighters are down there, they can fall. These pits are located throughout the riverbed, so they have the hazard of falling into these pits when they're down there. Additionally, like we've seen many times before, there's campfires. So here's a picture of one of the campfires that we saw out there. This picture here was an encampment fire. This occurred at 11:30 today. So the fire started in the encampment here and quickly went to the vegetation. Fortunately, our firefighters were able to get down there in time today to put the fire out before it grew any bigger. We also have a number of abandoned vehicles down in the riverbed and also overnight campers that are in vehicles. And these are our access roads. So as you can see, our access is being limited by the abandoned vehicles down there, and there's multiple vehicles in the area. So the cost for our mitigation actions is I'm here before you tonight seeking additional funding to conduct the hazardous fields mitigation work. This work will reduce the wildland fire threat to the residents of this community. We are seeking $58,000 for weed abatement attachments for our city equipment and $400,000 for additional contractor cost. We did receive some grant funding and will continue to seek more. Battalion Chief Hallett told me the Fire Safe Council may have additional funding available next year, and he's going to be working hard to obtain that funding. Minus the grant funding for this year, our total request tonight is for $278,000. We anticipate the cost moving forward on an annual basis will be about $100,000 a year to maintain these areas. As some of the larger vegetation continues to grow, though, we may seek additional funding for future mitigation during those years. At this point, we anticipate a request for additional funding every 4th or 5th year for the larger vegetation out there. The $100,000 will be to maintain the lower grasses along the roadways, and also we've created some fire breaks with the current funding, grant funding we have right now, and we expect those to last for a few years. We'll continue to evaluate different modes of mitigation, and some of those modes of mitigation may include masticators, mowers, weed whackers, goats, hand crews, and low-intensity burns. It should be noted, though, we are every morning checking the weather conditions, and based on the weather conditions, we'll determine whether we work in the riverbed or not. So even though you approve this amount, if you approve this amount tonight, it doesn't mean we're going to finish it in the next couple of weeks. So if it's hot, dry weather, we're definitely not going to be down there in those type of conditions with that machinery. So the options before you tonight: option 1, take no action. Option 2, authorize the city manager enter into a contract with private vendors to conduct the hazardous fuels reduction work in accordance with the Paso Robles Fire Department Salinas Riverbed Emergency Plan 2020 and purchase the required accessory equipment to complete the work. And option 3, provide alternative direction. Staff's recommendation is adopt resolution 20-XXS, authorizing private vendor contracts and accessory equipment purchases related to the hazardous fuels present in the Salinas Riverbed corridor, and empowering city staff to take immediate action to provide necessary hazardous fuels abatements. With that, I'm open to any questions you might have.
Thank you for that presentation, Chief. We appreciate it. We will be taking public comments on this at the number that we listed before. And before we get to that, let's have any council questions of staff we might have, starting with Councilman Gregory.
Yes, thank you, Steve. So Jonathan, I've got several questions for you. With the budget being presented, what percentage of the riverbed will be cleaned out with your the budget you're presenting?
I think we're looking at 140 acres with an additional 39, so about 180 acres, and total acreage of the riverbed's about 480.
And we've already done.
I don't have an exact percentage for you. The work that we already did in 2019 has already grown back, so we are going through those areas again.
Okay. And then are we going to be doing the work year-round on our own when we don't have contractors? Is that the idea?
Well, we can't do the work year-round because of the water flow and restrictions by either Fish and Wildlife, the Regional Water Board, Army Corps, so we won't be down there when the conditions are wet. But we hope, and working with Matt Keeling from the Water Board, we're hoping to get in a lot earlier next year, somewhere around March or April, to start conducting this work. We will use contractors, and for the 100,000 moving forward in those years, most likely would utilize city staff, and then some contractor conduct some weed whacking down there.
So just for clarification, the 100,000 pays for contractors and city staff, or we'll be looking for further funding each year?
We anticipate for the next few years that the 100,000 will be adequate for, if we get that additional accessory equipment for the city's vehicles or for the city's machinery, then we think that we'll be able to complete that ourselves.
And then have you come to a completed agreement with the Regional Water Quality Control Board?
We've come to a temporary agreement to complete this work here. David Lucaro and multiple of my battalion chiefs here are currently working on a long-term plan, and I was told that a draft should be ready any day now.
Okay, and then what kind of equipment are we getting?
You know what, I'm going to defer that one to Chief Harris because he's the one down there doing all the work, and he's the one that spec'd the equipment. Randy, you available?
Yes, sir. We are getting multiple mower heads and hydraulic coolers for our existing skid steers and excavators. That'll let us reach up on the embankments as well as mow the flat areas to maintain the fire break.
So are we going to purchase a masticator also, or no?
That's not currently in the budget. We've rented a masticator and are currently using a masticator down there for the thicker fuels. We feel that the mower will be able to keep up on the fire break, and then about every 4 to 5 years, we would need to look at options of bringing in a masticator.
All right. So I think that's all my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilman Hammond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jonathan or Randy, did this last fire last Friday hit any of the fire break at all?
Actually, Chief Howlett's on the line, was the incident commander of that fire, so I'll defer that one to him.
Yeah, Scott, yeah.
So the original fire that started along Navajo, we did do some treatment in that area. However, that had a pretty narrow space of vegetation before it met the river channel. Fortunately, right by the condos at the when you first reach Navajo and you make the turn where the drainage was, we did do some good clearance there, which provided some really good defensible space to those condos. However, where the fire spotted to, there was no break in place there from the previous work last year.
Yeah, I recall I came down to IC with you and Jonathan, and I kind of observed the same thing. You know, I think we all know that wind conditions can really make fires do crazy things real fast. And again, I voted no originally on the money spent to try and put in fire breaks because, again, they grow back within a year, and fire, when it gets going, it's going to run right over the top of those fire breaks. It's truly, I think, in my opinion, money that we just don't have to spend in that way. And that's when I'm kind of going down the road on this situation here too, where we're asking for more money to do something that, again, will not last and it will not really solve the problem. So I'll get into it later, but that's really all the questions I had, other than the fact, Jonathan, you said again, after this work is done, you said about sound like 25% of the riverbed would be not cleared, but basically managed.
Yeah, I think thank you for bringing that point up. This does not mean that we're not going to have fires down there. The vegetation will just hopefully be a lot lower to the ground, which will, kind of stop the crowning of the fires, which promotes the ember casting, which causes the fire to jump the road and things like that. So by taking these mitigation actions, we're trying to minimize the size of our fires, but in no way is this going to prevent our fires.
I think we were very, very lucky Friday night that the wind was going down the riverbed, not to the northeast, where it would have jumped River Road, South River anyway, and gone up the hill. So again, we were lucky, but the main issue obviously is the human element and down in the riverbed that we need to address. And that's why I called for the special meeting tonight. Mayor Martin was in agreement that we need to talk as fast as possible. That's really the root cause of this issue, and throwing money at it in this manner, I mean, to me, is money we don't have currently right now with our budget situation. So it would have been nice to have this second after we talked about the other item 2. So I'll stand by for further discussion later. That's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor?
Sounds like we lost Mayor Martin.
It could be. I think I'm up next, so with your permission, I'll proceed if that's all right.
Well, maybe we ought to hold for a second, Fred, until we try to get Steve back on.
Mayor Martin dropped out of the Teams meeting. I've sent him another invite to join. I'll let you know when he's back in the room.
All right.
Hello?
Mayor Martin, can you hear us?
Yeah, we've been waiting for you.
Well, something went dead. Something went dead. It said, wait, we're trying to reconnect you. So.
Okay, well, you're
Where are we now?
reconnected.
Where are we now?
It's my turn.
I'm Mr. Mayor, John Hammond. I've finished my comment, and Fred's ready to go ahead.
Thank you. Go ahead, Fred.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This, I believe, is an emergency. We have had structures that were not only damaged but destroyed, and we have an ongoing danger of fire. And I don't think we can just say, okay, we've got to find a way to prevent them. Yes, we have to find a way to prevent them if possible. But we are dealing with multiple agencies, both state and federal, involved with the river. And this creates additional problems. And this is a problem that any government that starts to get as bureaucratic as we have gotten. But
are we still in council questions?
Yes, we are.
Are we still in council? Okay, because
Yes,
I'm not
we
hearing a
are.
question.
No, yes, I am doing a question. Because of those factors, I'm wondering what are we doing in the purchase of any equipment to spot these fires early and react early before we need to pull in this much equipment? Is that part of our plan?
Mr. Strong, are you referencing some type of camera system so we can watch
drones? Maybe drones mounted on with cameras or infrared. Also, we could have mounted cameras and/or infrared cameras mounted on various poles, etc., high enough for hillsides that can see the river and see if there's fire down in that river being started artificially or by some other means and react more quickly. Is that not true?
That's definitely an option we can look into. I know CAL FIRE has cameras spread throughout the county to keep an eye out just for that.
Okay. is that something we are looking into in addition to this? Because if we're going to spend this kind of money for clearance, then we should have some way to keep track along the way and have a better idea where to clear, shouldn't we?
I would be happy to look into that for you and get back to you with cost.
Okay, and I think we have a possible solution for that, but I'll get into that later when we're having discussion. Other than that, I think Councilman Gregory handled most of the questions I'd be interested in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Garcia.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. My question, Chief, is on the safe routes that you were talking about. So I was listening to you and you said something about safe routes. So is that something that we don't have for personnel to get down there right now? And you're looking at maybe planning that out?
So as you might have saw from the pictures I showed you where I was standing next to that stuff, it's as tall as I am. So when they're going down there for fires, typically they don't find a road that they can get in on, and it's hard to get access otherwise. So what happens is they get in there and they're in the middle of the vegetation and the fire can get back behind them. So we do not currently have safe routes throughout the riverbed, but the mitigation work that we're doing is allowing us to have those routes.
Okay, thank you, sir. That's all for me.
Okay, and I'm sorry I missed out on part of the questions there when my line went dead here, but I was down in the riverbed with fire personnel and with Assemblyman Cunningham and Supervisor Bashong and folks from the Water Board, and there was some discussion about potential in the future of widening the window we would have to do mitigation in the riverbed. Can you comment on that?
Yes, sir. We actually did talk about it, but you were offline, so I'll repeat that. When we were down there talking to them, they said that we could possibly get in there as early as March or April, as long as we had the biological surveys conducted, which we do typically. So that's our hope. So we're not faced with the situation we're in right now where we can't get in the riverbed and work every day because of the weather conditions.
Thank you. I'm informed by the city manager there is a desire with a couple of council members possibly to consider both this item and the next one together. To do that, we would have to take public comment. I would suggest taking public comment for both of them at the same time. Let me just do a straw poll here on who would like to consider these two items together, starting off with Councilman Gregory.
Can I hear more why we should do that? I'm curious why.
Okay, thank you for that. And so let's put that off for a second. I understand from Mr. Frucci that Councilman Hammond had this request. John, do you want to talk to that?
Mayor Martin, was that regarding this meeting tonight? I didn't quite hear exactly what you were leading up to here.
Yeah, I received a note that you wanted to consider this item and the next one together. Is that not correct?
Oh, yes, exactly. That was my comment. I think you might have been offline, but essentially I was hoping to take number 2 first and then number 1 second, because again, it has to do with spending a lot of money that, in my opinion, will not do a whole lot of good. So however you want to handle it. Okay. We probably should have made that decision before we started the discussion. So I'm thinking it's going to be more awkward and confusing for the public if we try to lump these together. So let's go ahead and talk about this one, and then we'll move on to the next one, if that's all right. And if the council, as part of the discussion, decides that they cannot make a decision on this until we hear the next item, we can deal with that then. Is that all right with you? Yes.
Yes.
Very good. So let me go down the list one more time for council questions. Try to get this straightened out. I apologize again for being offline. It was a technical problem. So Mr. Gregory, any further questions?
Not at this time.
Mr. Hammond?
None on item 1, no.
Thank you. Mr. Strong?
No, sir.
And Councilwoman Garcia?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Now, on my document here, my live document, which may also have been affected by the glitch, I have no one waiting for public comment online. Is that accurate?
No, Mayor Martin, we have 3 callers on this item. The first is Dale Guston.
Okay, so let's go to Mr. Guston. Dale, are you with us?
I am now Dale Guston, 945 Spring Street. Can you hear me?
I can.
Can you hear me? Okay. Can the rest of the council hear me?
We're good, Dale. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna go. I hope you can hear. I hate this system. I like the podium, but this is the way it's got to be. My comments really do relate to both 1 and 2, and I understand where John Hammond's coming from. I also want to tip my hat to John Hammond, retired volunteer fireman in this city. He knows all about this situation. He knows how we used to clean out the riverbed and not have this problem. I hate the way that all these government agencies want to put their hand in and tell us how to do it and how we got to protect the homeless people. The homeless people is the problem. If we don't get them out of there, we're never going to clear this problem. And I think it's time we stand up to those government agencies and say, we are going to protect the citizens of Paso Robles, and we're going to clear out the homeless, and we're going to clear out the riverbed, and that will cure the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Who do we have up next?
Next caller is Tom Cardy.
Mr. Cardy, welcome.
Hello, this is Tom. Can you hear me?
We can.
Good evening. I'm a part-time resident here in Paso Robles, but I live full-time in Tempe, Arizona. And we had a dry riverbed, a lot like the Salinas riverbed called the Salt River. And in 1999, we turned it into a 2-mile-long lake. We cleared out the river bottom of all the bushes and homeless, and we bought 2 rubber dams, and we use it as flood control. So when the rains hit, we lower one of the dams, the West Side Dam, and when the rain stops, we rise it. And along the banks are now apartments and condominiums and offices, and they paid for that lake. Has anybody ever entertained turning that river bottom, the Salinas river bottom, into an economic engine for this city and the county? Has anybody ever had that idea or visited Tempe Town Lake to get an idea of what it could be?
We'll get you an answer for that, sir. Anything else?
No, that's it. But if you want to learn more about our lake, that I think the Salinas River bottom could be the same way as TempeTownLake.gov. So basically, we turned a dry river bottom, just like the Salinas River bed, into a recreational and flood control and economic engine for the city of Tempe and Metro Phoenix. And I just think this has so much potential to do the same thing for this river bottom. You can clear it out. You can have the developers pay for most of it and some federal government money, and it could be just a masterpiece for this area. It could be a really big tourist attraction for the local citizens and people that want to travel and see the beautiful water in the river. That's my 2 cents. That's all I want to say. And
very good.
I hope somebody down the way looks into that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Who's next?
The next caller is Jim Fordinakis.
Good evening, Jim. Welcome.
Hello. Can you hear me? How you doing? Can you hear me?
We're doing well.
I'm talking to a speaker in my. Okay, I'm talking in my car here through my speakerphone. Anyway, Council, this is a little repetitious, and I'm not sure if it goes to 1 or 2. But first of all, Council members Garcia, Gregory, Hammond Strong, and Mayor Martin. I live at 72 Navajo Avenue along the Salinas River. And the fire that occurred on July 10th was extremely frightening for the residents that live in that area. Because of the direction of the winds, which Councilman Hammond alluded to, and the efforts of the fire department, the fire could have caused much more damage to the homes along this area. Since the removal of the recycling unit behind Albertsons, the amount of homeless traffic along this pathway has diminished. In addition, I've noticed an increase in the use of pathway by joggers, cyclists, and people walking their dogs, including our own county superintendent of schools, Dr. Jim Brescia. In addition, many families with their children and elderly, including me, do their daily walks. My point here is my neighbors and I, we have a neighborhood watch, strongly support any efforts the city council can do to address the issues in the river in some manner to maintain the natural beauty that this resource provides to our community. Specifically for us, is we have a lot of brush right up adjacent to the river that's really high that we were trying to water down that night to keep those oak trees from burning. So if you could start at least get these down, we would appreciate it. And the last thing I have to add is, and this is to the last caller, I had a report you did a long time ago. It was a lot of money, but it's called Follow the River, Follow the Dream. And it did include, I think, a lake in there about how we should deal with this river here. And it was pathways and horse trails. And I know it's a lot of money, but maybe we could relook at that in some manner, write some grants. That's my comment. Have a good evening, and thank you for dealing with this again, gentlemen. Good night.
Thank you so much for calling. We do appreciate it. Do we have someone else online?
No other callers for this item.
Thank you. I'll close public comment. What I'd like to do here is let's go ahead and get comments from the council, and then if the council desires, we can delay taking action on this item until we discuss the next one. So, Mr. Gregory?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on a couple comments from the public. So we did take a look at damming up using bladder dams for the Salinas River, and it was when we were doing the river walk and the river dream. In actuality, the Army Corps of Engineers paid for 90% of that project in Tempe, and it did exactly what the gentleman said on the radio, on the phone there. It did help out, and it was a project totally funded by the federal government. And I don't know if the Salinas is appropriate for it, but it sure feels like it. The bladder dam concept is a really good one because you can use it for flood control, and you can also use it for maintaining a lake level in there. My other comment or question would be for Chief Starnetta. When you have the vehicles in the river blockading your path, is there a way to have, do we have to bring in a bulldozer or special piece of equipment to remove them? And the second part of that question is, can we do that in advance so we don't have to cross that bridge when we come to it in a fire or emergency?
Mr. Gregory, I'll answer a portion of that and then ask Chief Harris to talk about the rest. We do have the ability to tow some vehicles out of there if they are accessible, but the problem we find is vehicles are showing up constantly, so just trying to keep up on that is problematic. And Randy, are those vehicles, are they accessible, or some of them so far in there that we can't get to them?
The vehicles are mostly on the periphery. Most of the people with vehicles down there access from North River Road. And so what we're looking at doing is putting up some barricades and trying to limit the vehicle access. And by doing that, we can limit the amount of debris that they're bringing into these encampments. So that is part of our plan.
All right. Thank you very much. Those are my comments and questions.
Thank you, and thank you for addressing the question about development in the riverbed, which was asked by our member of the public. I didn't get to that. The Follow the River plan was something that was quite ambitious and has been partially accomplished, but as Councilman Gregory indicated, the project that was referenced by the caller was probably federally funded. Doesn't mean such a project in our city couldn't be also, but it's going to take some time and work to check into that, so appreciate it. Mr. Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only comment I would say again is that I think the root cause is humans in the riverbed have become a life threat, not only to themselves, but our residents on the east side of the river. And again, that is really where I'd like to go to basically in item 2. And I would like also then maybe to hold off any kind of direction on item 1 until we do hear and speak to item 2.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Strong?
Yes, yeah, I want to talk to this too, and I'm willing to hold off on the decision here until we also do 2. But, you know, I did projects along the Salt River in Tempe, and so I know that area extremely well. The problem there was considerably different than here. One of the problems with the Salt River was when they had a rainfall, it was very dangerous river, and they had flash floods that would just flood the streets and the highways and kill people. So that's not what we're facing in our particular river. But what they've done with bladder dams is still a very tempting thing. There are other things too. We've created our situation down there. This is not something that was created by nature. It was created by us when we built the Salinas River Dam, which was built by the Corps of Engineers, by the way. And it was for the water source for San Luis Obispo. If we renegotiated the terms of the Nacimiento Lake with Salinas, with the Monterey County, I believe if we could get an additional allocation of water from that lake, which has a huge amount of water, but they have to run down the river almost every year for flood control during the rainy season. I think we could probably totally replace that dam if we had to, and restore some of the river and get rid of a lot of this vegetation by putting some water back in that river. That would go a long way toward exactly what we wanted to do and follow the river, follow the dream. But Bladder Dam is another way to do it. We would probably have to renegotiate the releases from the dam and how much water goes down the Salinas River further in order to keep the rest of that vegetation down there going. So you're talking about a huge, huge project, and it has a lot of different ramifications. But it does relate to what we're talking about here, because through the actions we've taken in the past in order to get water to our people, we've created the hazards in the river here in Paso Robles. And we also have a hazard that if we try to build that dam higher, we already know from other reports that we have that there's a danger of them flooding out half of this city. So we have a lot of different problems, a lot of them created by ourselves through the years, through the decades. If we're going to try to address this now in this generation, at this time in history, then we have to look at it in a big, much broader sense. Meanwhile, we have immediate current threat because of the actual situation currently existing. And under that exact situation right now, we do need to do something and do it swiftly and do it effectively. This is an emergency, and I believe that some of our emergency funding probably is intended in part for just that purpose. So I'm looking at, let's get some solutions going, and let's look at some long-term solutions at the same time. And that may mean a lot of work at every level of government and with a lot of different agencies. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Garcia?
Yes, sir. So I'm okay with waiting with Mr. Hammond as well for item number 2.
Very good. Thank you. Just a couple of notes from me, and I also will fold the next one into this decision. That's fine. I think we're faced here with a very similar situation that we were faced at with the vegetation problem. We had an emergency situation that needed to be dealt with immediately. We have a long-term management plan that needs to be put in place. So there are actually 2 issues here. So I think that, the idea about utilization of the riverbed, maybe reviving the Follow the River plan, though, as Councilman Strong said, this would be a huge project, a large undertaking involving several agencies, and would probably take a long time to do. So it's not a solution for our immediate problem, but certainly something worth considering for the future. I'm dubious about negotiations with other communities over water. We went through about a decade-long period of negotiations, which resulted in our Nacimiento water project and a lot of balancing of water needs and sharing of water and whatnot. I'm not saying it wouldn't work. I'm just saying it's probably kind of a long shot, and I would look at it that way at this point in time. And so I think that, again, we have a long-term vision for the utilization of the riverbed, which would address some of the problems we're seeing right now, but something that's going to have to take backseat to any emergency action that has to be taken to make sure that in the next few years we don't have a fire that damages a large portion of the city. That being said, I hear from a majority of the council that they do not wish to consider a decision on item 1 until we discuss item 2. We've had council questions, council comment, and public comment on item 1. We're going to hold off on that decision until we go through item 2. So unless there's a problem with that, I'm going to ask that we now move to item 2. Mr. City Manager, is any problem with doing that?
No, sir.
Mayor Martin?
Thank you.
Mayor Martin?
Yes.
This is Steve Gregory. I just need to take a 2-minute personal break. Is that okay?
Okay. Okay. Can we play the theme music from Jeopardy or something? Or
Kind of.
Mr.
We'll
Mayor,
take a
that'll
2-minute break. We'll take the 2-minute break and mute our microphones. Let us know when you're back, Mr. Gregory.
Mr. Mayor, that'll also give us an opportunity to put up Mr. Hammond, Mr. Mayor, just in case.
Thank you. Mr. Hammond, are you with us?
Yes, I'm online.
Okay, we're ready to resume then. We'll call the meeting back to order. We're now going to consider item number 2, reducing fire and water supply contamination risk in the Salinas Riverbed and assisting the homeless who will be impacted. Mr. Frucci?
Thank you, Your Honor, and I appreciate the council's creativity in considering these two items together. They are clearly interrelated. We just felt each one was sufficiently complex that we didn't want to intertwine them in one staff report, but they certainly do depend upon each other. So, Mr. McHugh, if you wouldn't mind loading up the PowerPoint. There we go. So next slide, please. Mr. Chief Snardana already talked about the fires that are occurring. Next slide, please. And so he talked about the areas that he's requesting, the total of about 198 acres that he's requesting to clear. And those are exactly the same areas we are looking at to ensure that we protect the homeless by having them move elsewhere and assisting them to move elsewhere. And so this is the north area. Next slide, please. This is the central area. And next slide, please. And the south area. So as Mr. Hammond has already alluded to, removing the vegetation is absolutely crucial because it's removing the majority of the fuels, but it doesn't remove all the fuels. Next slide, please. Because as we see, we have significant amount of rubbish that has accumulated in the river bottom over the last few years. In 2016, we did a comprehensive cleanup, and the CAT team and others under Frida Berman and Chief Lewis have also been doing cleanups, but it's almost an inexhaustible supply of items that get brought into this area and can serve as fuels. And as we all know, fire requires fuel, a source of ignition, and oxygen. We can't stop the oxygen. We have to clearly stop the fuels, but we also have to address the source of ignition. Next slide, please. Just one more look at some of the fuels. Next slide, please. And it's important that we continue to remember this isn't just an issue of risk due to fire. We're also risking our water supply by potential contamination from trash, from sharps, from bacteria and other pathogens, and drugs and other chemicals. Next slide, please. And clearly what we want to do is to get back to whether it's all covered with water as a lake or as vegetation. We want to get back to a point where we can control the amount of vegetation. By visibility, we can ensure there are not encampments and other sources of ignition, and also to ease the task of our firefighters when they do have to get into the river bottom. Next slide, please. So as the council remembers, in 2016, you declared an emergency in the river bottom and implemented a policy that allowed us to, through a comprehensive effort, work with the homeless in the river bottom to remove them from certain areas of high risk to them and to the rest of the public by working not only with ourselves, but by multiple agencies, and also protect their property. So we are recommending that the council at this point adopt an updated policy, and that would ensure that in this era, we also seek to preserve a low incidence of COVID-19. The homeless in the river bottom have actually been very stable in the sense of low incidence of COVID-19. We don't want to do anything that would impact that. We also will continue to work with multiple agencies, just as we did in 2016, just as we've done in the MASH efforts that the mayor has led. And in fact, Wendy Lewis and Jeff Almashat are available tonight to discuss with you the efforts that ECHO is already planning to assist the homeless. So the basic sequence of events is in the areas that the chief noticed would need to be cleared of vegetation. We would go in ahead of the masticators and hand crews and provide notice, and that would be primarily our CAT team, our 3-person CAT team under the police department, augmented by others, and provide notice to and contact to every single homeless person there. The notice would indicate they would have 72 hours to move out of that area. Also give them referrals for assistance, and some of the people that would be talking to them would be either associated with ECHO or HSOC or the Department of Social Services, others that can ensure that the homeless who need assistance are able to access it if they so choose. At the end of the 72 hours, we would go back through and we would have previously given them containers for their belongings to assist them in moving their belongings. And if there's enough belongings that they can't move at all, then we would either rent or purchase sea trains to be able to store property of apparent value for them during this period. And then we would bring in the crews to actually remove all the trash, do so in such a way as that the sharps are taken care of, especially. And that would all precede then the vegetation removal. As a result, at the end of that process, we would end up hopefully with an area that looked like the slide that you just saw, where there is still vegetation, there's still trees, there's still ground cover, but there's visibility, there's a lack of places to hide, there's lack of places to construct shelters and campfires and toilets, so that not only are we working with the homeless to leave this area, but we're also ensuring to the extent we can that they don't return. And part of that obviously is to help them find services and find other areas, but also we would have to, on a regular basis, go back down to inspect and ensure compliance. And so the police department is looking at 4x4s and other ways to assist their ongoing inspections and contact with any homeless who do reestablish residence in that area. And so that as you see, that would all take place before the removal of vegetation. So it is part of a comprehensive effort to not only reduce the risks of fires and water contamination this year, but set up an ongoing process so that we can maintain that. And with that, Mr. Mayor, members of the council's staff is ready for questions. Mr. McHugh, if you go to the next slide. We're asking you to approve an updating of the 2016 policy, and that policy is fairly comprehensive. It addresses the removal of garbage, the removal of temporary shelters, and not only initial but ongoing code enforcement abatement procedures to prevent the reoccurrence of the encampments. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. As usual, council questions will precede public comment. Then we'll have council discussion, starting at the top of the list. Mr. Gregory.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. I have a question. We did, I guess, a sweep of the river, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and I think Ty's department ran that sweep. Is this the same kind of protocols we did for that? Because they seem to be pretty successful on removing most of the encampments.
So yes, sir. It's an enhancement of what we did in 2016. We learned a lot then. We've also learned from what other cities have done. So the city of San Luis Obispo recently did a similar process. In 2016, it was a multi-departmental effort. Frida Berman, David Lecaro, and Assistant Fire Chief Keith Agson, I believe, were the three people in overall charge. I don't remember if it was Sergeant Afana, who else was involved from police, but Commander Davis is here tonight to talk about that. We would take advantage of all those learnings from 2016, and that's part of why we're recommending the update to the policy. But we would again do that as we did then, but also we have additional resources. We didn't have ECHO assisting us in taking overall responsibility for the homeless in North County, so it would be an enhanced process.
So if I remember right, we were able to take their goods and put them in containers so they had their personal property was protected. What about their placement of where would we send everybody to? Where would they go?
So we can't actually send people, and Interim City Attorney Kimberly Hood may want to address that. We really can't force them to go anywhere. We can provide them assistance. We can incentivize them. We can't force them. But what we can do is, and what we're proposing tonight, is that we declare a certain area where they can't be. And that's for their own safety as well as the safety of the rest of the community.
So that's basically a notice to move to provide safety for their personal safety.
And the community, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tom, again, your recommendation is to update a 4-year-old policy regarding the garbage cleanup and all that. In my opinion, though, we need immediate action to remove humans from the riverbed, period. I'm not sure if that means updating the policy that you're talking about in 2016, but I doubt that it had anything like that. But again, I think at this point, when we declare an emergency and clear and present danger to life safety and our firefighters, that this policy is backseat. I think at this point, in my opinion, we give them less than 72 hours to get out of that area. And if they're found back in there again, they would be arrested. Again, bottom line, I think we need to take a very hard stance. But what I'm getting at is, do we need to have this policy updated to do such a thing?
Councilmember Hammond, I would refer your question to the city attorney.
Sure. And so I think we do need the policy. You already have the 2016 policy in place. And so what actions that you do take, you need to be cognizant of that existing policy, which we've changed just a little bit, actually, to update just to recognize some more recent case law on these issues. You can provide less than 72 hours notice, but 72 hours is usually the minimum that's suggested, if at all possible, because you have a lot of moving pieces and factors, and you're more likely to draw a challenge if you do it in a shorter amount of time. And so a lot of the factors in play here, we have the added issue with needing to get our own city staff ready and posting notices so that then they can move. We are working with ECHO and other social services agencies to help facilitate that movement and other places that they can go. As the city manager noted, we can't direct them that they have to move to a certain place, but we can facilitate with them places they can go and safe places to do that. The CDC has guidelines that are discouraging encampment movements at the time because of COVID-19. Because of the current emergency, as you noted, we know that we can't wait that long. So part of this will involve added measures and protection measures to protect against any further spread of COVID-19, while also trying to balance the different emergencies. So there's been very little changes to the 2016 policy, just some general cleanup to help facilitate the movement.
Okay, Kimberly, I can barely understand what you were saying, but phone was going in and out. I'm not sure where you're at, but the point though is it's an action that I believe needs to be quick and prompt. I'll bend to legal hours or whatever, 72 hours if that's what it takes. But the point is to get people out of there, and if it means having a fenced area that they're allowed to go to, that we find a place where we can get them to, where they will not get outside and back into the river. That's, I think, really part of the puzzle piece here. But I'm not sure exactly. I'm looking for some sort of policy recommendation here to have immediate force to get this done and not to wait. I mean, they could start a fire right now, tonight, and we're back in the same position. So I don't know. It's just going to be, to me, very, very important action that we take some sort of immediate action. If it means starting at 72 hours now, tonight, or whatever, tomorrow morning, so be it. But part of it, again, we need to talk further about a place for them to go. The way I understood that the state in the past said that we could not get them out of the riverbed because we had no other location for them to go. So it doesn't, I'm assuming, spell out what type of location that has to be. But if we designate an area where homeless can camp or be with their possessions, and we designate that, you know, if they stray from that area and get back into the riverbed and start fires again, that they could be arrested. That, I think, is got to hold up in a legal court. That we've got to protect our citizens and everybody that is downwind from these kind of sources. So, I mean, you wouldn't find in the Sierras somebody allowing camping in a vegetated area like that that was so prone to fire. It's just ridiculous that we have not been able to take action. Frankly, pretty ashamed of our leadership in handling the matter because we bent to Sacramento's direction that we could not do it. If we get challenged, I'm ready to fight for it. But the point is, we need to protect our firefighters that have to go in there, our residents that are downwind, and whatever policy we can make tonight to make that happen, I want to see it done. Bottom line.
Thank you. Mr. Strong?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I don't think I want to make a 3-minute statement like was just made by the previous speaker, because I think this is still for questions. But along the line of questions, I believe, are these people still citizens of the United States, and are they entitled to the same rights as every other citizen? Our city attorney or someone?
Yes.
Yes, all right. If they're that, and we're dealing with riots and demonstrations regarding discrimination, are we not encouraging further rioting if we discriminate against them based on economic conditions? Maybe not race, maybe not religion, but their economic conditions? Are we not discriminating?
Well, Councilmember
Anyone?
Strong, I think we're not this. Can you hear me? This effort
Yes.
is not to discriminate. It's to address the emergency with the fires that are happening there. So it is certainly not taken in that vein. This is a measure to address the emergency that the fire chief has described to you in detail. So that is what this is for, and that's why we're having the policy facilitate the movement of folks out and trying to work with them, but not okay.
Can we give other people less than 72 hours if we give them an order?
Well, the 72
Can we order
hours
people to do things
is to
immediately?
help them move out. There are times when you can move in less than 72 hours, but you will the time, it's our understanding in talking to the police department and other agencies that have dealt with this, that it will probably take us that long to make sure we have the social services and everything in place to be able to help facilitate the movement.
Okay,
Okay,
I can understand that.
For them
Now,
to be out.
the next question I have is this on the property. When we arrest somebody and they go and they're taken into custody by the police department, do they not then confiscate any property they have on them and they put them in some place for storage?
If there's
Anyone?
an arrest, I think that's probably a question for the commander, but that is my understanding. If there is an actual arrest.
And then when they're released, are they offered their property back? And if they don't accept it, then we have to still keep it somewhere? I'm wondering where the police keep the property that isn't claimed.
Mr. Strong, this is Commander Davis. Yes, if someone is arrested, we do book their property for them. It's kept until they're released, at which time we will dispose of it. At which time we'd give it back to them. Regarding how we dispose of that property, there's tons of different evidence laws regarding how we can and what time frame we can dispose of property. We just follow those guidelines, but it varies greatly for a lot of different situations.
Okay, do we follow the same regulations and the same procedures in dealing with those people who we are moving somewhere or detaining or changing their place of the temporary residence based upon this policy?
Well, the policy clarifies that we have to allow them to take property with them. That property which is deemed to be trash or debris that has not been claimed, we're able to dispose of. That's certainly one of the hurdles in this problem, is trying to figure out what property belongs to somebody, what property doesn't, because the areas in the riverbed aren't always occupied by the same person on a nightly basis. So that's a little bit difficult to kind of get to the bottom of at times.
Okay, so is that going to be part of our policy and our procedures in enforcing in enacting this policy?
Yes, sir, absolutely. We have to follow the guidelines that are in the policy, and obviously the law and the case law that keeps coming down regarding this type of situation.
Okay, very good. I think that's the bulk of my questions on this particular item at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Garcia?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Commander, while I have you on the line, I believe the protocol that you're speaking of, I think I saw it in a webinar, and this is part of how other cities are taking care of the same situations. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. There's a lot of case law out there, and we've been working diligently with Kimberly to make sure that we're on the correct side of how we handle all this, the property. As you can see by some of the pictures shown by Mr. Ferrucci, there's an abundant amount of property on there, and trying to identify what has been discarded in trash and what actually belongs to somebody is a very tedious process.
Right. I totally agree with you, and I saw the pictures. It's going to be very difficult. But as far as what Mr. Strong was talking about, what we can and can't do is because of the case law that is out there available for us to follow. So I totally understand what you're saying. On what Mr. Hammond was talking about, as far as moving people, have we looked at where we would have a location or a site? Has anybody already discussed where we would recommend a site?
I can speak briefly to that. There's definitely been a lot of discussions of where we will move people to, as stated by Mr. Ferrucci and the city attorney, that we can't really move people places. We can have them leave an area for safety concerns. Where they go is really up to them. We're kind of trying to limit where people cannot go. We're definitely trying to give people an option of places, but if they take that option, is up to them.
Right. I'm sorry, I misspoke. I understand it's just an option and it's up to them. But I just wasn't sure if we actually had a location already in mind of where to suggest when the CAT team does go in. Are they saying, you know, you need to move out, you need to get your belongings, and this is a safer place for you if you need somewhere to go? I wasn't sure if there was already a location in mind that we'll be telling them as we go through there.
So Councilmember Garcia, Wendy Lewis, the CEO and president of ECHO, is just getting out of a board meeting of ECHO, so she'll be getting on the line very shortly. And she and Jeff Almashad have been taking the lead in looking for both temporary and long-term options for housing of the homeless within Paso Robles and the surrounding areas. So if you don't mind, as soon as she gets on the line, she'll be able to answer your question.
Okay, and then just one more thing on that, Mr. Ferrucci, as far as the vehicles being removed, they had said in the report here that some were drivable and some were not. So are we also looking at a place for those people that just need somewhere to park overnight? Would that be included in that as well?
Yes, ma'am. And we also have, with Commander Davis and others in the police department, experts in removal of vehicles that are not movable through towing and other means. So it's a comprehensive solution.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a few questions, and I'll preface it by again saying that I was down on the riverbed last week, and the photos that we've seen tonight don't really do the situation justice. Folks that are just tuning into this issue may have one idea of what homeless encampments are, but it probably doesn't include latrines, barbecues, and dammed up rivers. So that being said, I see this. I mean, obviously there are human elements to be considered here, but my questions are going to revolve around how we handle this in other physical locations. I mean, if we had a problem with a group of people that were dropping human waste in the city park, how would we handle that?
Commander?
Mr. Mayor, there's certainly as many rules, lots of rules regarding that. We would, it's just a very complicated process, but obviously that's something we would address immediately if it was in such an area. I mean, it's definitely not any different in the riverbed, except for the fact that it's not visible.
Yeah, so the difference is that it's sort of out of sight, out of mind for most people, but it's the same rule that applies, whether you do that in the riverbed or you do it in the city park.
Yes, sir. I think if you had the additional resources through Fish and Game and through water board stuff, I believe the riverbed could even be a greater offense. But again, it takes a collaboration of a lot of different resources to make that.
Thank you. And that would also go for abandoning drug paraphernalia, bags of rubbish. If there was a group of people that wanted to camp together and increase the likelihood of disease spread, or increase the fire hazard in the city park, we would take immediate action because that's right there in front of our eyes, right?
Well, yes, sir, we would definitely do our best. Unfortunately, as you know, are well aware of, the camping ordinance has been somewhat questioned in the courts, but certainly littering is not an option. Again, that gets back to trying to identify what property is property and what property is trash in the riverbed. But definitely with the, as you spoke of, needles or hypodermic needles, we would definitely address that. And we try to, but identifying whose they belong to is always a problem in the riverbed.
Sure, I understand that there's one man's trash is another man's treasure. I get it, but also there are certain other things that are just either completely trash or completely illegal. This plan, if the change in policy, if we are to approve this, in addition to just clearing the debris out that we saw photographs of, are we going to be filling in those latrine holes and breaking down those beaver dams that are holding water back on the riverbed?
Mr. McKinley, would you like to address that, since that's really a water quality and stormwater issue?
I suppose once everything else was cleaned out, that we could send sewer collection equipment in as much as possible to try to clean up. There's a huge amount of cleanup before we get to that part, but protecting the drinking water supply is hugely important, and it's, it needs to happen soon.
Right. Okay. We've had some conversation about 72 hours versus sooner. From our perspective, from staff perspective, if we were to give the go signal tonight, how much time does staff need to prepare to get down there and get this job done?
Mr. Mayor, I can speak to the police department a little bit on that. I think we would probably be the first line headed into the riverbed area to try and start this process. We do have 3 CAT team members that have been down there every day this week. As they've noted, it's very, very populated right now, and I think it's an ongoing process. It would be something we'd have to work closely with social services and the fire department to see what areas are of greatest concern and try and stay ahead of them. I don't know that we could say if we hit the go button today, we would have everybody out that quickly. We would certainly have to work with the immediate need areas and start to go from there. The entire riverbed is a very large place, and it would just take us time to work through it, I think.
Okay. And then I'll make sure I understand this. I've kind of heard it approached from both sides as far as people are ushered out of this area, whether they're being told to go somewhere or whether they're being told not to go somewhere. In other words, if I understand correctly what's been said, there would be a portion of the riverbed which is basically off limits. You can't go there. but we wouldn't be saying specifically, you should go over there. Is that correct?
That is correct, but there'd be a third part of the message, which is, and we want to help you, and here are the locations of services that are available to help you. We would strongly recommend that you go here. But once again, that's up to them.
Okay, very good. Now, I understand that now we do have online Mr. Al-Mashad from ECHO. Mr. Mashad, are you with us?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
you've probably heard some of what we've been talking about. If not, we can certainly ask the questions again, but if you have some comments, we would welcome.
I've been listening.
Go ahead.
Everything that's being said, I don't disagree with much about what's being said. We as ECHO certainly understand the concerns that the city has about fire.
Hi, you've reached Wendy Lewis with ECHO Homeless Organization. Please leave a message and I'll return your call as soon as possible. Thank you so much and have a...
I'm sorry. Somehow we have Wendy calling in. My understanding of the interpretation of the Boise law is that if you are moving somebody, there does need to be a designated place where they can go. Otherwise, they can go to a park or set up a tent on the sidewalk, which is what's happened in many of our other cities. So our belief is that having a alternate location where they can go is the best solution, and ECHO is certainly willing to do everything we can to service such a site. I do want to take issue with the comment that ECHO is taking over all responsibility for the homeless community. We're here to provide services, staffing to do outreach, to get people services they need. But this would be in collaboration with the city, and having a place where people can go is really key to what we're hoping to do.
Okay, let's see if we've got some council questions of you, sir. Mr. Gregory?
Well, I don't know if this is for Mr. Alshad or not, but my question is on the policy itself. I believe the direction where Mr. Hammond is going is once we ask them to move for safety and welfare and the water health of our river, that we can't let them come back in. They may choose to go to a facility that's provided like ECHO or a camp or whatever. But can we have a policy that won't let them return because of the fire safety and health and welfare of our community and from our sanitation health and welfare for our community? So I think it's our job to make that policy stringent enough so they won't return to the river and they'll stay or go to the places that are being provided for them. That's my comment.
Councilor Gregory, that's part of the distinction between an imminent threat to safety where we go in immediately and say, move, 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 versus what we're trying to do tonight, which is create an area that not only in 72 hours is off limits, but it's a standing interdiction from being in that area. And so what we would be creating is an area that as long as the fire chief and the city attorney believe there's a risk to public health and safety from fire, and as long as Mr. McKinley believes there is a risk to our water supply, would be an area where no one could go, not just homeless, but no one could be camping, setting up any kind of encampment or otherwise living in that area. So that's the intent of the policy, and that's why the 2016 policy is still in effect, so that it's a long-standing prohibition from going in this area.
Okay, so that answers my question, that they would be prevented from coming back to the river until it was deemed safe.
Yes, so Commander Davis, as I mentioned earlier, working with Chief Lewis, is setting up a system whereby, as the chief characterizes it, this becomes a beat. This becomes a police beat in the city, just like all of our other beats and all of our other areas of patrol. And so there would be regular patrols in this area to ensure that the laws are being adhered to.
So if I might, Tom, that it may be able someday that it would be safe enough for those people to return back to the riverbed, but I'm not sure that it would ever be safe to the water supply to have people living right over top of the water supply.
And Mr. McKinley raises a very good point, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. The reason that this is such an important and fragile portion of our water supply is that the river bottom is primarily sand. So not only does that make it very difficult to set up a bladder dam or any other kind of dam, because unless we seal the river bottom, the water is just going to permeate into the soil and become groundwater. But it also means that any contamination on the surface can very quickly and very easily be carried below the immediate surface into our water supply.
And in addition to that, the alluvial aquifer, which is what is under streams and rivers, is much more shallow than the Paso Robles Formation aquifer. And so, these wells are not particularly deep because the river water is not particularly deep. So they're not 500 feet down.
So I'll make one more comment. I think in our policy, we ought to have in there for our flooding in the wintertime for flash flooding and water flow. So.
Thank
you. John, do you have any questions of Mr. Almashot?
Kinda, yeah. I just want to say to Jeff and Wendy, again, we, on behalf of the city, appreciate what you do in ECHO. It really helps a lot of people, and we want to commend your work. What I'm hearing from you, though, is kind of what I'm thinking. Again, we have to designate an area for them to go. Again, we can't tell them to go and stay, but at least we have, at least from what I'm understanding from Sacramento, that direction is we have to have a place for them to go. And so I think that's going to be a secondary part of this policy that we're going to be working on. I can't do this tomorrow night, but we need to find a location. I've recommended several places for staff to research along past Robles Street, but that's another thing that if we had a place that, again, ECHO could step in. We all know that we had that facility set up to go down by the wastewater treatment plant, but Caltrans canceled that with a $2 million tunnel request. But even still, the clear and present danger is people and humans in the riverbed. And I was going to bring that up too. Again, it's not only this time of the year, the hot summer days, but it's also during the winter when the water's running fast. We've had several occasions where we've had to put firefighters on the end of a tether of the helicopter to raise and help people out of there. And again, it's going to be a year-round policy that we're going to do, in my opinion, that once we have this in place, anybody found down there can be cited and removed. We have to have.
So John, we're still in questions.
Yeah, I'm just winding up again. This is something I want to make sure we get.
I understand, and you're doing a great job. It's just we're not at the point to do that yet. So.
Yeah, I know. I don't have any real questions of ECHO. Again, thank you for your service.
Thank you. And don't lose those.
Mayor
thoughts.
Martin, I'd be happy to respond to a portion of that.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I would be happy to respond to a portion of that.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, if you found, go ahead.
First, Councilman Hammond, thank you for your kind words about our work. We do appreciate that. ECHO is prepared to respond very aggressively. Our interpretation of the Boise law is that if you are moving people, there has to be an alternative site for them to go. It is our intention to set something up quickly so that people will have a place to go. If there is a site, we're looking at options as far as tents. We've had conversations with people as far as buildings that might be available. My understanding is that when you give them the 72-hour notice, they have to have a place to go. And ECHO has been working over the past couple of days to make plans to put an emergency shelter in place. It may start with tents. It most likely will start with tents. There is a possibility it would go to some more stable structure like an education building or something like that. But it is our intention to move quickly and work in concert with the city. And I'm seeing Wendy is also trying to get on the line. So I'm not sure if I have to get off for her to get on, but I know she does want to comment.
See if anybody else on the council has a question for you. Fred?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure I do, and I don't want to get into a statement yet. I'm wondering if we have to actually have a place designated. Is this another alternative we might be able to present to the state regarding the boys' school area that has been abandoned by the boys' school?
Okay. Thank you, Maria.
No, sir. No questions right now. Thank you.
Thank you. I did get a note from staff. We can have Jeff and Wendy on simultaneously. So Wendy, are you with us now?
I am. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. Did you have anything further to add to the conversation?
Okay. I did. So I apologize for my tardiness. We were just coming off of an ECHO board meeting. So I was also bringing the subject up with our board. As Jeff mentioned, we are committed to providing resources and programming in order to successfully have somewhere for these folks to go. But want to also make sure that it's clear that from a situation that we're in financially, we can't absorb any financial anything in addition financially that is not already committed or we've already successfully raised. So one of the key pieces to this would be the location would need to be found along with our help, but the city's help to identify the location. And also the city would need to provide the infrastructure for what would be needed to keep the environment safe and provide hygiene. We would be committed and able to provide the programming, which would include staffing and policies and food and some things like that. But the infrastructure, we do not have the funding for. The funding we received recently through the county is for the programming of an emergency center, not the infrastructure.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll go back to the council. We'll see if there are questions of you, Mr. Gregory.
No, I'm going to wait for after all the comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond.
One additional, maybe to staff, have we contacted the county? And with regard to, our borders to Riverbed go north and south. Beyond that, if these folks tend to move north and south, they may be out of our jurisdiction. But we should, I think, be in coordination with the county somehow.
John, if I can answer that, I've had conversation with the Supervisor Pashong, and he's very supportive and is actually starting to take action to dovetail with us. He just has nothing specific right now, but I have made contact with him.
Okay, that's a start. I think, again, we need to definitely engage them and be coordinated in our efforts.
Agreed. Anything else?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Strong?
Nothing at this time.
Thank you. Maria?
No, sir.
Thank you. So I do have one follow-up question for Wendy. Wendy, you mentioned the funds that we received from the HEAP folks that we were going to put into a shelter project. That was stymied by Caltrans conditions on that project. It's your understanding that none of those funds could be used to provide the type of services that we need to move on immediately for the situation?
So the heat funding, that has actually been approved for more of the long-term solution, not an emergency solution. The funding that ECHO just received through the CARES Act in response to COVID, our plans would have been to open an emergency center early fall using those funds. We can shift those to help provide the programming and the staffing for this emergency center you guys are looking at now. We could move up that timeline. We've talked with the county and that is possible. But the heat funding, it's not movable for this emergency services because it's looked at as a long-term solution.
Very good. Thank you very much. Okay, again, I don't have names. I'm assuming there are people waiting in queue to speak for public comment. I'll open that up now. Who's first online?
First caller for this item is going to be Dale Guston.
Very good. Mr. Guston, welcome back.
Yeah, Dale Guston, 945 Spring Street. First off, I want to comment on our emergency service personnel in this city. They have handled these problems this year extremely well with their limited resources. And all of them have just been hard workers, and they need recognition for that. But on top of that, I agree with John Hammond. We need to protect the citizens of Paso Robles that don't live in the riverbed, just as well as those that live in the riverbed. Those that live in the riverbed are creating a hazard to their own health. And so we need to move them out. And we'll comply with the law of designating an area they can go to. And that shouldn't be that hard, working with ECHO to provide some of their services. But I have a question of Chief Stornetta. In the last 3 years, how many times have you had to go put out fires in the riverbed?
We'll get that answer for you, Dale. Any other comments?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Who's up next?
Next is Lisa Jowett.
Very good. Let's put her online. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, thank you. I'm a San Luis Obispo City resident, and I've been really concerned about sweeps that have been happening in San Luis Obispo City. And now I heard about the one that's happening during a pandemic, which is directly against CDC guidelines. With that said, I understand that there's a fire danger. I heard that a lot, and I do care about the water supply as well. But I wanted to remind everybody that we're talking about human beings, and it's a really complicated situation that Paso City has not addressed yet. We didn't have any emergency parking for any of these people that had cars that would work. There have been no sites provided for wonderful people like the ones that are running ECHO facilities. No sites have been proffered. No one's using the Mid-State Fairgrounds. No one's using the parking lot. I mean, the high school gymnasium. School is probably not going to go back in the fall. Sorry if that surprises anybody. But the Paso City needs to provide a location for ECHO and other volunteers and employees of ECHO to run the facility. And I recommend some sort of event tents in combination with some sort of smaller tents. I work with the unhoused here in San Luis, so I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. And it's time for Paso City to take leadership and work with and not deny and push everything under the rug. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Next caller is Susan Funk.
Very good. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am Susan Funk. I'm an Atascadero City Council member, and I'm also vice chair of the Homeless Services Oversight Council for the county. And I'm calling in because this issue was the subject of considerable discussion this afternoon at the Homeless Services Oversight Council meeting. And the key concern there is that a place has not been identified for people to go currently. That ECHO was notified of this pending action Monday night, and they have worked amazingly and diligently to try to find something, but they have not been yet secured property. And if there is no place for people to go, not only is this a human problem and a legal problem, but it is also a problem for all of us who are also on the Salinas River. Because if people are cleared out of Paso Robles without any place to go, they're going to come up to Atascadero. They're going to come up through the river to all the areas in between. And it just exports the same risks to the water supply will continue. So it cannot be counted as a victory in Paso Robles if what you do is simply move the problem upstream. It was in the discussion that I heard earlier in the conversation, there was a lot of implication that in fact there was a place for people to go. What we heard this afternoon, and that I hope that Wendy and Jeff being on the line maybe they have better news in the last few hours, but as of about 3 o'clock this afternoon, there was no place identified for people to go. And that's the piece. It's like real estate. It is location, location, location. You need to if you don't like where people are, you've got to provide another place for them to go. And not the responsible thing to do is to do that, and the human thing is to do that. That's how you create something that will deal with the water quality and the fire risks that are real, and that I completely understand as a colleague who also worries about those concerns just upstream. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, could I have a question of our colleague from Atascadero?
If she's still there.
Susan?
Yes, I'm still on the line.
Yeah, Susan, how is your city regarding homeless? Do you have a riverbed problem down there?
Yes.
You do?
We have a problem in the riverbed. We have a problem in the creek. Currently, the problem in the riverbed largely is on property owned by the Atascadero Mutual Water Company. Our fire department responded to an incident along the riverbed this afternoon, successfully dealt with it. But this is a problem for us too.
Yeah, and is your council working on a location for them to be relocated, or a place to go? In other words,
our council has the ECHO shelter that we have, and we have the ECHO shelter in Atascadero, and are regularly serving those, and we have a seasonal warming center that's active and sponsored by Transitional Food and Shelter. Both of those are programs. We are not currently looking to disband. The city is not currently looking to disband encampments, but is addressing people more individually to try to get them out of these problematic situations.
All right, so you're working directly with other agencies to make that happen. So, great. Thank you very much, Susan.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next caller is Jeff Carr.
Thank you. Welcome.
Yes, hi, this is Jeff Carr in Paso Robles. A good conversation, but I'll admit I've probably heard 90% of it 3 or 4 times in the few years I've lived here. I agree with all the previous callers. I think we know what needs to be done, but I just want to focus right now on that this is an emergency situation. And so we have to, treat it like an emergency, pick a place. And, I would agree with Mr. Hammond. I think zero tolerance for the riverbed right now because of the fire danger. And I agree. I think 72 hours is too much. We've had some cool days here now, but tomorrow or the next later, it'll be back up to 100, and we'll be having some winds, and we could have a problem very easily. So beyond, I agree, like I said, agree again with what I heard in the previous calls, but my plea would be do something now. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Next
Who do we have
caller
next?
is Mary Alvarado.
Very good. Mary, welcome to public comment. We look forward to your comments.
Oh, good evening. I wanted to comment a couple things. I live literally 1 block from where the house burned on Creston. So this is the whole fire thing is a big issue. And I noticed that there was machinery going on down there today. The deal with the homeless, we've talked about the fact that we need a place. And I find it kind of odd that the state does not see this as an emergency either and would allow us to use the boys' school. I just don't see this. And I'm wondering if, so one question is, what is the state stand on allowing us to use that property? The other thing that we kind of failed to recognize is the human factor of people that are unhoused and the fact that they have a voice, and that I wonder if we have ever included members of the homeless population into some of the decision making and some of the policy, what drives the policy, and to get their input as to what they need, what they want, because it's a diverse population. Some people like being homeless. Some people are there because they've lost their job. Some people are there because of mental illness. Some people are there because of substance abuse. So the needs are, I think, important to address, but I think having their voices heard may make it a little bit easier when we are presenting to them that you need to be out of the riverbed. So I'm just wondering if historically, if we have ever included those people in our policy decisions.
We will get you those answers. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Thank you very much.
No other public comments.
Thank you very much. We'll close public comment, bring it back to the council. A few questions here. One caller asked, and this will be a question of our fire department, over the last 3 years, how many fires in the riverbed? And I assume by implication, any idea how many were caused by homeless?
In the last 3.5 years, 474 fires have occurred within the city limits. 303 of those occurred in the riverbed.
Okay. Do you have any stats on the actual causes of those? Were those all caused by human encampments, or any percentage of them?
We do, I would say a large percentage do occur within encampments. We do not have cause because just like today's fire at 11:30, there was nobody present when we arrived.
Very good. Thank you. Question from a caller about the boys' school. This answer could take all night, but I'll ask the city manager to give us a short rendition of the city's efforts and conversations with the states regarding the use of the boys' school, and if there's any new information about the state's predilection to use that school for homeless services.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the council knows, we have been working assiduously for 4 years now to try to acquire the boys' school site. The very first order from Governor Newsom, executive order, when he came into office, dashed all of our efforts because that order said that any surplus state-owned land must be used for affordable housing. So then we worked assiduously with the state to try to develop a proposal for affordable housing that made sense both for this community and the state. And we reached a brick wall there when the state said that the affordable housing had to be on the site on land that would continue to be state-owned, and therefore any housing would have to be built with prevailing wage, which meant it would not be affordable to the people in our community who needed to be affordable. Then the governor came with a second executive order, which said, which replaced the first order and said that any surplus land of the state-owned must be immediately used for the homeless. And so we contacted the state and to find out what their guidelines were and what their specifics were, and it's basically the city would have to keep the entire land as one parcel, and the city would be totally responsible for the entire 130 acres, and it must be totally devoted to homeless personnel and homeless issues. And we said that is certainly an admirable goal. It's way beyond our capabilities to acquire and manage property of 130 acres totally devoted to homeless issues. And that's where the current issue stands.
Very good, thank you. And the last question I have here is, and Councilman Gregory, you might want to chime in here because you are a point person on homeless issues and working with HSOC. A question about including the homeless in the conversation about homeless needs. Has that occurred?
Steve, would you repeat that question?
Yes, the caller wanted to know if homeless residents had been included in the conversation about homeless needs.
Yes, well, I mean, all along it has been the case, and we recently were able to receive or get a grant of funds, the HEAP funds, to do that very purpose. But it's not really going to be fast enough or quick enough for the emergency need we have now.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could piggyback on Mr. Al-Nashot, who is dedicated to helping solve and leading the solution to the homeless problem in Paso Robles, also attends the meals program that Paso Cares, which has recently been incorporated within ECHO, runs. And so Mr. Mashot is frequently in conversation with a number of the homeless in our community and is very up to speed on their views and their needs.
Very good. Those are the questions that I gleaned from callers. We're going to turn it over to the council for comments now. I certainly have some of my own, but I'm not going to lead the way. I'll start with Mr. Gregory.
Yeah, I'd also like to repeat what Councilman Hammond said about ECHO. I want to say thank you to Wendy and Mr. Alshot. They've been very diligent about working on the issue of housing the homeless here in Paso Robles, and great partners. And we're going to need their help to solve some of this problem. I also did receive a text from Susan Funk today. I missed the meeting at HSOC, but she did ask if there's something that they can do to help. So we have a Atascadero, we have ECHO, and I think the real problem is the policy is fine. The problem is, where does everybody go and how do we get there? And I think we need to get very creative, very fast about how to house everybody that's coming out of the river, so that, or at least have them have options. And without those options, it's going to be difficult. So I think we need, as a council, to get together with the staff and figure out a way to help house some of the people so they have an option to go to housing, find a piece of land that we could build tents. I know there is, I don't want to speak out of line, but I know ECHO is in the process of purchasing shower facilities now that are portable. And those are the kinds of things we need to do, I think, is get creative, find some locations for the folks to go to, and start moving people out of the river in a judicious and fair way. But also, we need to have somewhere for them to go, somewhere to offer. I don't think it's our intent to damage any other of or send anybody north or south. We just want to get people safe and out of the river, to stop causing fires or having fires maybe burn them out, to help clean up our water. We have enough resources in our city and our staff and our council to deal with this. And I think the best way to deal with it is to get together and figure out some options and some offers of locations of people to go to in the interim. And Councilman Hammond had an idea of a fenced-off area with all the facilities of sanitation and showers and housing, like by tent or RV or whatever. But we need to do something, and we need to do it now. I think one of the pressures that we do have that we have not exercised is the state. The fairgrounds is closed. I don't want to interfere in any of their operations, but it is an emergency. It is a homeless emergency, and there's certainly, even in the parking lot area, we could put together something that would help. So I just want to address those items. We have HSOC behind us as well, and Susan Funk listening very closely to what we're doing and wanting to help. And I think we should get down and figure that out. So it's very important. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Councilman Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My direction is basically to post as much as we can wherever they are, basically have our staff make a walk through the riverbed, posting a 72-hour notice to vacate. And then as far as a designation location that I've thought about is Mr. Gregory's soccer practice field. It's sitting on the north end of North River Road. We would put temporary toilet facilities there that they could use, but that would be the designated location that we are allowing them to be. I think that would suffice the ruling that we have a location, and this would be temporary. I mean, I would call it temporarily because this is time is of the essence, in my opinion, that we need to move. And if we designate that location at this point, maybe we can have some comment about that from staff. But that would, I think, suffice. And then after 3 days, we go back through and have sheriffs, our police department, everybody just make a sweep and get them out of there. And then we're going to be, making regular patrols like we talked about. I think we need to take a pretty hard stand on this one at this time around. So I'd like to have maybe some discussion, comment about those couple items.
Thank you. Mr. Strong?
Yes, I've restricted myself very much to questions and not made comments. So this is a bigger problem than we're even addressing tonight. But we're touching on the surface of it. All of our agencies, local, regional, state, federal, have all contributed to this problem over the years with the various things we have done, supposedly to advance our own interests. And those interests are good interests in every single case. But when we get to the homeless encampments and taking those out, the homeless are doing the pollution of the very environment that many of those agencies are trying to preserve. And that's illegal. So arresting them isn't going to do any good because they can't pay any fines. They can't afford anything. All we can do is incarcerate them, and that costs everybody even more money. And it's a poor solution. But we do have to get back and restore that river. That, by the way, everybody has to understand the Salinas River is an underground river primarily. There is far much more water flowing underneath the ground than there is above the ground. And we've always known that. That's historic. So when we pollute and we put latrines down there into the riverbed, we're polluting a huge water source that feeds everyone north, all the way through Monterey County, all the way up to the bay, and also probably contributes to our own aquifers to some extent. But that has to stop, and that's a very good reason to clean those out. But they still have to have a place to go, and everybody should contribute to it. Our different agencies that are concerned about the environment in there and trying to keep us from doing some of this.
Mr. Mayor?
Means our city and our structures and the things that we need in order to survive. And in that regard, that is when we have to all work together. And that means the federal government has to help provide some of this stuff. The state government has to. Some of these agencies have to. And I think we need to make this a much broader thing. In the meantime, we do have to reduce the fire damage and fire danger. And I think there are immediate solutions just for the immediate problem. And that's proposed in resolution number 20-XXX, which I favor because we have to do something and we have our obligation. And when it comes to Atascadero being taken care of because of ECHO, we also help supply ECHO with money. We've done it through a number of our sources of money in order to assist ECHO because it was told to us as something to serve the entire North County and the entire region, not just the city of Atascadero. So, you know, I don't think it's fair for Atascadero to claim everything to do with ECHO. And we're now having ECHO come in and try to help us with, in this particular location. But we've supported that particular specific location for homeless to be able to go to. And we have to do something. And right now, the only thing we have to do, can do, is what we have the immediate problem with the winds, with the weather, and with the homeless in the river. We have high fire danger. That has to be addressed. But we have to go beyond that from here on and start addressing some of the other aspects of this. And I'll let it go at that because I could go on and on and on. That's about as far as I want to go.
Thank you, Fred. Maria?
Yes, sir. I am with Mr. Gregory and Mr. Hammond. I know that this is an emergency, and I truly believe that our Paso Robles will all help. Once we find a location, we also have Paso Cares. We have I get several emails from the community that they want something done for the homeless. And I believe once we find a location, you know, we'll all come together and help out to make this safe for them and safe for us and safe for our community. So I'll leave it right there, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to start off my comments by revisiting where I started on this, and that is I think this very closely mirrors the situation that we addressed recently regarding the vegetation growth in Riverbed and the dichotomy between a long-term management plan and a short-term emergency response. I think we're faced with the same situation here. We've been struggling with putting together a permanent site for homeless in the city of Paso Robles for years. We've approached the state over the boys' school. We've worked cooperatively with ECHO, and we continue to do that. So far, these efforts have not borne fruit. That doesn't mean we should give up. We should work on a multi-agency basis to continue to try to locate and institute those services. That is our long-term, hopefully not very long-term, hopefully more medium-term need to put in place. But just as we were faced with an immediate need of addressing vegetative growth in the riverbed, I think we face an immediate concern right now with the threat to public safety and fire safety constituted by human encampments in the riverbed. So whatever action we take tonight, I would like to have the following components. I think we need to find that this does constitute a public health and fire safety emergency. This justifies immediate action to address that emergency situation and also implement a standing interdiction situation. So it's not a one-time cleanup, it becomes a regular beat for our police department and law enforcement agencies and public health agencies so that we can further minimize the impact on the riverbed of human habitations in the future. As far as relationship to the Boise law and the rights that people have to be there, I would not question that. I wouldn't want to argue that, except as we heard earlier this evening, if these same types of transgressions occurred in the city park, we would take a very different attitude toward them. And the city park and the Salinas Riverbed are both public property, and I think they need to be treated the same way. So I think we need to work with the other agencies. As I said, I've contacted Mr. Pashong. I've also spoken to Mr. Cunningham. I think the folks that we had a problem with over vegetative growth in the riverbed, the water board, should be very much on our side on this. After touring the riverbed and seeing the environmental impact of the situation, we need to work with all of these agencies to put together that medium-term plan to provide an alternative shelter space for the homeless. We can talk with ECHO and others about the first step of tent shelters and portable showers, leading to something more permanent, and that's what we should do. But immediately right now, my opinion is that we do have a public health and fire safety emergency constituted by human encampments, And I think that that is the driving force to take care of emergency action right now as we secure that interim action in the future. As I said, when we were facing the prospect of fires because of the overgrown vegetation, I don't want to be the one having to stand up in front of somebody saying, your house had to burn down because we had to wait for this medium or long-term plan. I don't think that's something any of us want to do, should have to do. I think it should be obvious that this is an emergency situation and we need to take emergency action while at the same time committing ourselves to that medium-term action, which will lessen the problem down the road. And those are my comments. Mr. Gregory.
Yes.
He's going to go around one more time.
We're going to go around again.
Now another round again. So I was hoping you'd say that. I wanted to, I'm going to reemphasize the need to reach out to, we have John Pashang, who's been interested in helping us. We already have ECHO on board as our partner. Take Susan Funkin and Tascadero City Council's offer for help. I think we need to reach out to the state. We need to find a place. We need to do something now and fast. And there's different ways of doing things, but I think we need to have a roundtable discussion with everybody concerned and try to pull it together quickly. In the meantime, I agree with the policy. I think we should put it in place so that we move forward and at the same time we find locations for people to have choices to go to. That's my comment.
Thank you. Mr. Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you again for your comment. I was right on board with your immediacy of this situation, and thank you for calling this immediate emergency meeting with council. I think it's important that we definitely make some policy tonight. I have a feeling from what I'm hearing personally that staff is getting the right direction from our comments, what needs to be done. With regard to, we have a little bit of discussion on this location system that we need to find. What's everybody's feeling? Maybe when Browntown talk about that too, about the North River Road soccer practice field. That's going to be in Mr. McKinley's area, obviously, of the city. But I mean, I'm just thinking right now, someplace that is close that could be done. Staff maybe can answer that question. What about that location?
Mr. Mayor, would you like me to address that?
Yes, please.
So I would really suggest we have Wendy or Jeff Almashad answer that. They've taken the lead working with Mr. Gregory and others on looking for sites all over the city. We did have a discussion with them about some of the sites they're currently examining yesterday, and I'd like them, if they're able, to give an up-to-the-minute update on their search.
Do we still have them online?
Okay, so I'll do that instead.
Tom?
So we've looked at a number of, we've looked at locations all over the city. In our meeting yesterday with city management, Sulphur Springs came up again. I think we all agreed that there were safety concerns for people getting to that location, with Sulphur Springs being a two-way road. It's not just an exit ramp. There are cars coming on and off. I think there's concerns there.
Jeff, let me interrupt. Jeff, let me interrupt. I'm sorry. Mr. Hammond was not asking about Sulphur Springs. He was asking about the site that's highlighted in Mr. Starnetta's graphics that's on the east side of the river, just north of the sewer pipeline that goes from the east side to the west side. It's and we did talk about that site as well yesterday.
Plant? Is that the concrete plant or next to the concrete, where the concrete business was? Off of River Road, I believe.
It's farther north.
It's north. It's north of the sewer line, just north of 46 East.
I believe we're talking about the same property. That actually would be a workable solution. From what I know, there are roads down to the riverbed that people are using. I guess there are fire roads that are being used by the homeless. It's a place where they already are, and our goal would be to get them to come and stay with us and get some services, and then we hopefully move as many on as we can. I think that if it's the same location we're talking about, I think that we could definitely make that work.
Staff, Tom Rucci, question. I'm not asking to find a permanent location now. To me, we need to find a temporary location. This soccer field location that I'm speaking of is only temporary. It is a designated place temporarily for them to go until we have more time to find a more logical and permanent location that, of course, ECHO would be working with us on. But I'm thinking of immediacy here. Well, if we're going to post this 72-hour notice, we need to have a location designated for them to be able to go to. That's why I said that.
Okay, yes, sir. We absolutely agree. In fact, Mr. Almashot yesterday talked about their two-step effort. One, to find emergency short-term housing in the tents, as he'd already talked about earlier this evening, while they're securing the longer-term, more secure, more permanent housing. Yes, sir. We're in total agreement.
So that the only trick on that site, like the rest, is that there'd have to be real sanitation or real controls, or you're just continuing to contaminate the water supply.
And that's why I mentioned the chemical toilet situation. I'm not thinking more than a month here, right, to have staff be able to work out a location with ECHO. But you see what I'm saying? This is now, I think, should fit the bill for us to be able to enforce removal. And that's what I'm trying to get at. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I dropped out there for a second.
Yeah, again, that was my comment. Again, just to, kick it out on the table to talk about as a location.
Right.
The other thing I actually thought about was maybe we're not using Pioneer Park. All right. It has a restroom there. I mean, it's a grass area. It could handle a lot of people. That is another location, inside the city side of the highway. But, that's another possible location just to throw out. Again, I'm thinking temporarily here, not any way permanent.
I think I agree with you, and I think what we ought to do is we ought to give staff direction to provide us with a short list of properties that could be used on a short-term basis to handle that.
Exactly.
And you've named some of them already. So.
Right.
Okay. Mr. Strong?
Yes, thank you. And I agree with everything I've heard so far. On the long term, which I think is just as important, remember that the pollution that we're creating here affects the water supply that flows down the river, and downstream is Monterey County. So in the long run, we keep talking about our work, with all of our agencies right here. We've got to become more regional if we want to really address this whole problem in the long term. And that includes Monterey County, because anything that happens here affects them and affects their water quality. So I think that's very important that we start to include them a little more in the discussions.
Very good.
For what's been proposed tonight, I totally agree with what's being proposed by staff, and I will support that resolution.
Very good. Thank you. Maria?
I'm on the same note, sir. I agree with staff.
I have nothing else. We're actually straddling two different issues here. So what I'm sensing from the council is we want to take action on item number 2 before going back and revisiting item number 1. If that's the case, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, for a little further comment regarding item 1 and the amount of money that was proposed here was $278,000.
Yes.
To me, I would much rather use some of those funds to not only clean up the riverbed, but from human occupation, but also to assist in the temporary location, chemical toilets, that sort of thing, until this can be resolved more permanently. Again, the masticator and the clearing of brush is nice, but it's a budget item that I don't believe our budget's going to be able to sustain. it's going to grow back every year. It's, again, the human part of this equation that we're going to be able to fix. And the riverbed is going to do what it's going to do every year. But putting people down there really is the biggest issue. And if we can remove that and use some of these funds more effectively to keep them out, I think personally that would be better money spent to resolve the issue more permanent. Again, I don't know how much, maybe Jonathan can tell us how much money we have left from the original amount of money. When I've been going to work in the mornings, 7 o'clock, I see the masticator working just south of the 46 East, river crossing. And so there's a lot of dust coming up. I know they're working down there, but again, I'm just trying to say that if we can address this issue with the human part of it, the monies that we can have to pull from the reserves to make anything further happen in the riverbed for as far as clearing brush, I think should be more directed to solving the human issue.
I think it's an excellent question. And Mr. Stornetta, if you could comment, please, if we take positive action on item number 2 here, will that impact the need for the funds that are being proposed in item number 1 to reduce vegetation in the riverbed? Or is one inextricably linked with the other?
Well, I'd just say any funds that are, if you're not proposing any funds for the mitigation efforts, that just remember there's over 200 homeless down there. Not all are going to go to your temporary sites, and we will continue to have fires down there. We've seen that for many years already. So additionally, there are people that utilize the walkways, the pathways. There's still vehicles that drive by. So we require the residents in this community to conduct weed abatement. So I take it seriously that we conduct our part as well.
I hear what you're saying, and I guess my question, maybe I'll phrase it differently, is these two issues, reducing human encampments or getting rid of human encampments and their impact on fire safety in the riverbed, if that were to be successful, would that be a significant offset to the danger such that we didn't have to remove so much vegetation every year?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. John, does that address your question a little bit?
Exactly. I agree with Jonathan on that one wholeheartedly. Again, for years and years and years, we've been seeing the riverbed build up with vegetation, mainly because we're not allowed to go down there to clean it out. But it's the human element here that's raised its head, not only, again, in the summer, but during the winter. I remember seeing our firefighters, trying to rescue people that refuse to be rescued in the middle of a swift water issue. And we just absolutely need to take a hard stand that anybody found down there can be cited and removed. And we got to take a policy set up to make that happen. Whatever legal paths we have to do here, I think it's important that we take that step and continue and make it policy that we're not going to put up with it, bottom line.
Very good. Very good. So if I'm hearing correctly, and again, we're blending two issues here. If we vote affirmatively on issue 2, then we return to issue 1. It would be the direction of council to staff, correct me if I'm wrong, to use the appropriation of money from the general fund, not just for vegetative control in the riverbed, but also as is most effective to address the issue of alternative locations for the homeless. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's okay, exactly what I wanted. That's why I wanted to postpone that, Steve. Again, to me, if we make a motion, it's there, it's done. Yeah. But we can modify the motion on item 1 to redirect some of these funds to help with this other issue. That's where I'd like to see it go.
Right. So what I would suggest, John, if this is acceptable to you, is let's go ahead and make a motion and take a vote on issue 2. Return to issue 1, and then if you want to, you can make a motion saying you want to have a plan that encompasses both to be paid for out of these appropriated funds. Did I hear a city manager back there somewhere?
Yes, sir, you did. And
would you like to comment?
So I would recommend then that there are really 3 actions that we're asking of the council. First is to approve the updated policy and direct staff to undertake the relocation of the homeless that are living in the river bottom and the area designated on Chief Harris's map as an emergency and do it as quickly as possible. recommendation 2 and motion 2, or actually you could do all three of these together, would be to authorize the city manager to approve vendor contracts and accessory equipment purchases to undertake fuel removal and cleanup of the encampments and the trash. And then third would be to appropriate $278,000 from the general fund for all of the above purposes, and return to council if any additional appropriation is necessary.
The only thing,
not to be I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
Tom, we need to address a location of temporary, designated location for them to go, correct?
It's not in the motion. It's not an action item.
Well, we're making
that's true.
Modification.
But that's.
Mr. Mayor?
Hang on. Listen, the question is, can we legally talk about specific locations under the agenda tonight?
Mr. Mayor, I would ask you to consult with your city attorney.
Thank you.
Kimberly?
Yes, I think you can talk about. Alternate locations. I would suggest that we then return next week at the regular meeting to discuss further. But I think you can start providing direction this evening, given the policy and implementation of that is on the agenda as to alternative sites.
Very good. Thank you for clearing that up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Hang on. I got Mr. Strong waiting in the wings. Don't go away.
Yep.
Fred?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. And that is, I agree with what we're trying to do, but I don't want us to micromanage this thing. And I think that some of the decisions on some of the specifics need to be left to staff as to find the best way to implement our policies. We're setting policy. We're not trying to run every little detail of the city. And if we don't let our management do that, then I don't think that we're overstepping our bounds. And I don't want to be penny wise and dollar foolish in this either. If it's going to take a little bit more money for a long-term solution, I'm not opposed to using money that will save billions of dollars for this city.
Thank you. Mr. Hammond?
I was going to say, I'm not directing staff to do any of the two that I suggested, but that's just a start. And I agree with Kimberly that we should then come back next week and give staff time to bring back findings and things that they've suggested. But currently, again, I'd make a motion, basically what Tom said, exactly those three options. But again, with a caveat that we want to find a temporary location as well.
I'll second that motion. And then one of the primary locations, I think we should look at the ones that John talked about at the soccer fields.
Very good. So question, we have two items here. We have two things to vote on. Can we cover both with one motion, or do we need to have separate motions regarding item 2 and then item 1?
I believe the way Tom stated it, we could do one.
Hello? City Attorney?
Yes. I agree that you can do them in one.
We can do both items under one set of motions.
So we're combining item 1 and 2 together in one motion.
Yeah, one motion containing the three components that the city manager listed, approving the policy of an emergency relocation action, authorizing contracts for fuel removal, and then a plan encompassing both, appropriating $278,000. Is that correct?
That's my motion, and I think staff has our council collective thoughts together.
And I second it again.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, un momento. So we have a motion from Councilman Hammond, seconded by Councilman Gregory. Mr. Strong has discussion.
For clarification,
yes.
I believe what the city manager said was, and possibly more money as needed once they come back with the total overall plan.
Thank you for that. I was going to ask the city manager to clarify if I'd misstated. Mr. Furchi?
Councilmember Strong did correctly state my point. Yes, sir.
Very good. Does the maker of the motion agree to that?
Agreed.
Second?
Yep, agreed.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Hammond?
Aye.
Councilmember Gregory?
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia?
Aye.
Councilmember Strong?
Aye.
Mayor Martin?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. I think that was a good bit of work there.
Thank you, Steve.
Item number 3, COVID-19 economic recovery measures, revisiting temporary street closures.
Mr. Martin?
Mr. Gregory.
I am going to recuse myself for a conflict of interest because of my involvement in a local restaurant.
Very good. Record shows that Mr. Gregory is recusing himself. He will shut off his microphone and his speakers so as not to be part of the discussion. We will ask for a staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is David Athey, City Engineer. I'm here tonight to talk about the temporary road closure revisited item that's on your agenda. As everybody knows, on May 19th, I just want to give you a little background first. On May 19th, staff presented street closures, parklets, and park dining options for the downtown. It was close to the city opening back up for restaurants and wine tasting rooms and those kind of things. And so we gave council some options on how we could help the downtown businesses. At that time, council tabled the street closure item. Wasn't interested in that, but we did come back, staff did on June 2nd, and council approved parklets and park dining. The park dining, we hear from the merchants and vendors, is going very well. There'll be Stacy Jacobs may talk tonight, and she can give you an update on that. Parklets, we've had interest, but no applications as of this time. So currently, on July 13th, the governor shut down indoor dining and wine tasting throughout California. However, restaurants can still operate pickup or outside type facilities if they have that and it complies with the governor's orders. Bars and breweries are closed. They cannot operate at this time. And SLO County is now on the monitoring list of counties because we do not meet the 6 different monitoring requirements. So therefore, downtown businesses have contacted staff and I believe council members and to talk about reconsidering the temporary closures of streets downtown. And so I'm going to give you an update of that and give you some options. So tonight, you can take no action. Provide direction to staff and potential street closure options, refer it back to staff for more consideration, more options, or direct us not to pursue closure of downtown streets. Now, as I see it, staff has met internally to talk about all the different options that we see. We really try to brainstorm. We want to just kind of respond quickly to this current closure. We've also reached out to Stacy Jacobs to talk to her about different ideas and the downtown businesses. And right now I'm going to talk about what we see as the 3 major items, which would be a full street closure, a half street closure, or maybe just closing some of the parking lanes, or maybe just closing parking stalls. And so I'm going to go through that right now. So at the May 19th meeting, it was discussed to have a full closure of a street. One option was Park and 12th Street. The other option, 2, is one night a week would be just to close Park Street. Now, full closure of the street obviously allows full closure of the road. However, it requires a lot of staffing to close and open the road. I think the proposal was to do it 1 or 2 nights a week. So we would have overtime for that. The good news is parking is only temporarily impacted if that happens. And the towing, however, towing will be needed, which adds staff time and leads to unhappy people who have their cars towed. So it's there are some pluses and minuses to a full street closure. The second option is a half street closure. This is one of the ideas that city staff has kicked around. As you can see on the right of the screen is a conceptual plan. This would not have to be totally implemented, but it would consist of closing half the street down and creating one-way streets temporarily in the downtown area. This would allow access to the front of the buildings. The fire department needs to be able to access front of buildings to get to the standpipe so they can charge up the sprinkler systems that are in some of these buildings. It would also require physical barriers. There's an example of one right here on the screen. That would be a water-filled barrier to keep cars from driving into the closed spaces, which are represented by the yellow here in this area. This can be scaled. So this idea doesn't have to be a full-blown closure of all downtown streets and, and to make one-way streets and have a bunch of areas like this. It could be just, one block is closed. So it is, as a good news there, you can just scale this. Maintenance costs are lower. Once these barriers are in place, you're pretty much done. So it's a little easier to maintain over time because it's just in place and you set it up once. Also, as I mentioned, fire access is provided. However, it is expensive to implement. Each one of these barriers is about $600 to purchase. There's a little cost for the water that it takes to fill them. So a typical city block is about 350 feet. If you figure there's a 5-foot space between each barrier, it would be about $8,000 to $10,000 per block to install these, to install the barriers. That's for the half-street closure. The third option is a parking lane closure. This could be scaled. It could be the entire block parking lane is closed, or it could be just a few spots. And you see a picture here on the screen that shows the parking here taken up by some wine barrels with some flowers. In this case, they use pallets, I believe, to provide some separation. So it can be scaled. It could be the whole block, or it could be just this little area, a couple parking spaces. Two-way traffic is maintained in this case. It's downtown, so we have low volume streets, and we have typically lower speeds, 25 miles an hour or less downtown. Less parking is affected. You can use the K-rail barrier. It's expensive, or you could use another lighter barrier. Ideas that staff kicked around were maybe a 3/4 wine barrel filled with sand or some other type of material. Wood barriers like this to keep people from wandering out in the traffic are always a plus. The city engineer likes to keep people out of traffic. It provides a lot of access for emergency services. Again, they need to get to the front of buildings. It's a state law requirement. Towing is not needed in this case because once these are set up, there's no place to park in that area. So the restaurant would use this, chain their tables up, or bring them in at night and then put them out in the daytime. So that is also a plus. Not that there's reduced staff time because no towing is needed. Less police needed. Less expensive than a parklet. So a parklet, as we talked about that last meeting, typically has a raised platform in the street, has the same type of barriers, maybe has some plantings to make it a little more hospitable. But that raised platform is expensive to build. We've gotten quotes back from different businesses of around $10,000 to $15,000. It's a significant barrier, especially in this economic times. The city of San Luis has built some parklets. They've spent a little more money than that. They've spent $20,000 to $30,000 per parklet in their city. So this would be a less expensive option and easy to implement. It's very quick to set up. With some planning, it could go in rather quickly in days rather than weeks. And this could also be permitted like parklets. We have that process set up already for the city engineer to permit the parklet, get the signed agreements, or if the city decided it wanted to shut down an entire parking lane say on 11th Street near the restaurants between Park and Pine, then we would just maybe set up a program where we could get insurance and indemnification for the restaurants that want to use that area. So those are details, but we could definitely, staff could work those out. So just to wrap up, staff sees there's the best current options out there at the moment to implement something quickly would be something similar to a parklet, as you see here on this picture. This is kind of on the very low, simplest end, something easy to set up. It requires fewer barriers. We don't have any barriers out in the street. There's no need to close down streets at night or on a consistent basis. And matter of fact, it was just brought to my attention today that the city of San Luis is ceasing operations on closing downtown city streets temporarily. They found that it's impacting the other neighboring businesses. So they're moving just to a parklet type format, which would be similar to this picture on the screen. Lowest impact of parking. So if restaurants, if you decided to allow restaurants to take up just a couple spaces and do this, we would have the remaining spaces on the street. One note on that, I would, I would recommend that the handicap or accessible parking spots be maintained and that those not be subject to the program because those are needed, and we have a lot of requests for more accessible parking spots. This has a very low impact on city staffing. As you are keenly aware, we have budget challenges right now. Our staff in community services, public works, and police and fire are stretched thin. So this would be an easier, lower impact thing we could implement so that it would have less impact on the city budget. We can, like I said before, permit it like parklets for ease of implementation. You have the option, you could close a city block of parking, and restaurants could provide indemnification and just insurance to use that area. Or we could have them sign agreements for the little, just a individual parking eating areas. And I just wanted to mention number 10 on the screen. One of the ideas that has come up, came to our attention, and just something to throw out there is since a lot of food now is take out, businesses are looking for temporary parking spots. That can be, we can implement that pretty quick to stick up a sign in a bucket of concrete and say 15-minute parking for, restaurant pickup and takeout only. Just wanted to throw that in there. That is something that the downtown restaurants could need and would be very easy to implement. So I went through those three options, and I'd be happy to answer any council questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Athey. Let's go ahead and go to council questions, and let's try to keep it to questions. We'll start off with Mr. Gregory.
He is recused, so I'll take it, Mayor.
Thank you, John. I must be getting sleepy here.
Yeah, no, David, what about what I saw just driving here tonight? Did we give authorization to restaurants to use the sidewalk beyond, I'm thinking of Fish Gastro on 13th. I saw tables all the way down almost toward the alley. Did anyone give them authorization to do that?
No, that a lot of the restaurants and some of the wine tasting, so the answer is no, but we haven't followed up. We have stopped in and asked them to provide at least 4 feet of clearance. We wanted to bring this to you tonight and get council's direction on if you want to move forward with this kind of process. If not, I was going to work with the restaurants and wine tasting folks downtown and make sure that they keep their distance, and then give them a temporary encroachment permit so they could use that. But that could be part of your direction to staff tonight on what you would like us to do.
Right. That's where I was going. I mean, I'm not totally against it, although by doing that without authorization, I think we're, have a little bit of a liability exposure right now until we get some policy going. But so that was the main question. You're saying that we could use part of the sidewalk area for putting tables there rather than putting them into the street. And again, I'm thinking something that would be easy to set up and take down every day versus, closing a street, like you said, is costly for the city. It's going to cause a lot of issues for other businesses, just like San Luis found. And I'm not sure if all restaurants want to do that. So I'm thinking, again, it'd be nice to poll or find out from, the different restaurants that are downtown. I'm thinking mostly on Park, Pine, and actually 11th Street, all through there, 12th. If we were to allow use of our sidewalk through an encroachment permit and possibly a few spaces of the parking area that could be temporarily restricted at, say, from 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock or something like that. That's kind of what I'm hoping we can pull together here for direction rather than actually closing streets down, which is going to be a major issue for the city to do.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Strong.
Yes, my questions are, number one, which of the proposals that you've offered actually preserve the most parking for people to actually park and then eat?
So the proposal for a closing just parking stalls, Councilman Strong, would preserve the most parking if you decided to close a street down, because you would just have, like a parklet, you would just have the parking stalls in front of the business taken up. The other businesses that maybe aren't open at night or don't want one, those parking areas would still be open. So that the fewest use of parking spaces would be just to close parking stalls, like the parklet program.
That would save more parking than the one-way streets, half streets.
Yes, because the one-way parking on the half street would eliminate all the parking on one side of the street.
Okay. Then my other question is, why haven't we included the area, the side streets like Park and Pine between 13th and 14th, where we have restaurants also?
We certainly could. 13th Street is problematic from the standpoint of it's a collector, but in terms of closing streets or half street closure, but it would be available for a parking space type closure.
What about Park and Pine though, between 13th and 14th?
Yeah, well, the map right here just shows, it's just kind of an example, but we could do that up there. There are restaurants that are north of 13th Street.
Right, that's what I'm thinking of. I mean, if we're going to do this to try to help the restaurants, then we shouldn't discriminate against some restaurants. That's my concern.
Certainly, and there's no intent to do that. This is, it was more for just descriptional purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Maria?
Yes, sir. David, one thing on the sidewalk, I like that idea, but on the sidewalk, you said they have to get extra insurance, right? Now, would the ABC have to get involved in that, or is that part of their licensing for alcohol?
Yes, so the ABC would be involved if they want to serve alcohol out in that area. The ABC has just recently provided updated guidance on what a restaurant would have to do. So as long as they comply with ABC's guidance, that would be fine. If they can't comply, then I'm sure ABC wouldn't allow them to serve alcohol in those areas.
Okay, and then my second question on the sidewalk, like Mr. Strong just said, if we make this a policy for sidewalk dining, are we looking at just the areas on the map, or is that going to be like citywide?
It could be citywide, certainly, not just what's shown on this map right here. Again, that was just for illustrational purposes. There's some details in there on width and so we can maintain physical distancing and those other things. But I think as long as they meet that requirements, it would be, you could do it citywide.
Okay, and on the sidewalk, so we're just talking about the dining and wine tasting. Is that correct?
That's what this is geared to, but council could consider other businesses if it liked.
Okay, thank you, David.
Thank you. A couple of questions. You'd mentioned preserving the handicap parking spaces with the expanded inventory of tables. Does that affect our requirements for number of handicap spaces? Are we going to get in trouble over that?
No, that does not affect the number of accessible spaces downtown.
Okay, and if we use the actual parking spaces for the dining areas, some of those spaces are raked pretty steeply. Is that going to be really practical?
In some cases, it may not. When that slope exceeds 5%, so that's a cross slope on that. It may be uncomfortable to sit there and not really doable. We have some of those challenges on sidewalks too.
Yeah. Okay, and you mentioned the insurance. If we go that direction, and this is probably a legal question, is that enough assurance for the city that we're going to be indemnified in the case of trip and fall or anything else like that?
Well, I'll take a crack at it first.
Yes.
We have a typical insurance amount, and we would be named, the city would be named as an additional insured on their certificate, on their insurance. They would provide us proof of that additional name insurance, that we have that on file in case.
Okay, did the city attorney have anything else to add to that?
No, I think Mr. Affey covered it. That's our
Very good.
encroachment permit process.
Thank you. And as these spacelets or whatever you want to call them are set up, how will they be divided among the restaurants? Are we going to have people out there saying, these 5 are mine, those 2 are mine? How does that work?
I think fundamentally we would run this similar to what we envisioned for the parklet process, which would be the spots in front of the restaurant would be the ones that we focus on with them, work with them on. That is not to say that restaurants couldn't, or wine tasting businesses couldn't agree to get along and work together. I think that would be a win-win. So there may be a little bit of refereeing that has to go on, but I think that if we run it like the parklet process, that would be probably the best way to go.
Okay, and then hours of operation, the option 3 seems to be fairly portable. Are we going to say you can set this up at like 4 in the afternoon and it comes down by 10, or how does that work?
Certainly you could do that, like a temporary closure, or it could be, you could allow them to set up a physical barrier that's there 24/7.
Okay, and time frame overall. Of course, we're doing this in response to the impacts of the pandemic. God willing, someday that'll be over. What'll be the signal that we don't do this anymore?
Well, that would be the recommendation of council. I think we looked at before running this through Labor Day, the street closure. Certainly, council could put a time limit on it of October 31st. Of course, there's always Pioneer Day, so we'd have to be cognizant of that and make sure that this stuff's out of the street, obviously, for Pioneer Day. But other than that, we could set any time frame for it and run this as a temporary project.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Fred, go ahead.
Could I ask one question?
Sure.
I just want to piggyback on that. Could we tie this instead of to a time period to the closure order by the state?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be, you could do that too once they open up restaurants again.
That was going to be my question too. Thank you, Fred. So you had mentioned provisions for 15-minute parking spots. Do you know where you would put those? I know that I've had at least one merchant say, you know, my business is all pickup. If you allow people to put dining areas in front of my restaurants, my customers can't get to me.
Yeah, I think that if we run this like the parklet process, where you basically get a parklet or like a eating area in a parking spot in front of your business, then I think that would alleviate that concern, and we could work with that landowner to get them a 15-minute temporary pickup drop-off spot in front of their business.
Very good.
Other cities have done that.
Good. Okay, and then my last question is, when this issue came up the first time in front of the council, we actually had one restaurant owner, the Country Barbecue, located on the alley, saying that blocking parking or blocking that street would block access to his store. Under option 3, people would still be able to get back to that area, right?
That's correct. The alleys have to stay open. That is, the fire department needs access through there.
Okay. Very good. Those are all my questions. I, again, don't know if we have anybody waiting to comment. Can somebody fill me in?
We have several callers waiting for comment.
Okay, ready when you are.
First is Norma Moy.
Very good. Good evening, Ms. Moy. How are you tonight?
Hi, I want to listen, please.
Okay, we'll move on to the next caller.
Next
Who's our next
caller
caller?
is Eric Jensen.
Thank you. Mr. Jensen, welcome.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking the call. Not much to say, just I think you need to act on one of these items. I agree with staff. I believe it sounds like the best is just, either the concrete construction barricades or the plastic ones. You're talking about going from 15 to 30,000 down to, $500 to $600 a barrier. Which I believe the restaurants should be able, or hopefully I shouldn't say should, be able to afford. But yeah, I think you need to act on that tonight. That would mean there are no street closures. Cars could still drive. The barriers are very safe. I was just in Los Gatos, and they lined the street with the concrete ones. I can send you photos. I think I already sent them to the city council, but it was unbelievable. So all the restaurants outside were full, spaced 6 feet apart, and business was booming. Restaurants were staying open and thriving, and everyone had masks on, and they were safe from cars driving by. So anyways, this is a huge, let's get this passed. Everybody that I polled in the wine industry, some 50 people, were 100% behind this. Obviously, I know the hotel and hospitality industry is behind it. So anyways, thanks for your time, and let's not postpone this any longer. Let's make this happen and keep our people in business. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments.
Next caller is Stephen Herring.
Thank you. Mr. Herring, welcome.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for taking my call. Appreciate it. Hope everybody's doing good tonight. So yeah, I'm definitely in favor of figuring out some sort of solution for the street closures, or some sort of solution to help these local tasting rooms and restaurants downtown to continue to try to not even thrive, just survive during these times. I own a local wedding and event rental company. It's called All About Events. So I'm feeling this effect just as bad as everybody else, including the restaurants. So I have a lot of friends that are restaurateurs in the local downtown Paso area. So we're willing, as a company that's holding on by a thread right now, to do whatever it takes inventory-wise for these local downtown businesses to continue to operate. Obviously not at max capacity, because that's impossible when you pull your tables and chairs out onto a sidewalk, but in any capacity. As I'm sure everybody's very aware, restaurants, you need to turn those tables quickly. I see the one problem with pulling them out and only designating the sidewalk area, it kind of contributes to two different issues. It's congestions for walking if you're having cars parking in the parking lot or the parking spaces with tables out on the sidewalk, and you're only able to fit one or two tables in front of each restaurant. I don't see that being feasible. So I think we need to put our heads together to figure out a larger idea for fitting more tables and chairs in the downtown area, whether that's the parklet idea, which I've seen work in different locations. I helped Stacy Jacobs with the downtown dining in Paso. That's actually proven to be very successful. People are happy. So one idea that I had that I was kicking around with Stacy and also the Downtown Slow committee yesterday was just shutting down the park and putting tents over there, or tables in designated areas for different restaurants. This restaurant has this corner, or these two restaurants have this corner of the park. These two restaurants have this area of the park, so on and so forth. Yes, it's going to be a little bit more logistically challenging for the servers and that type of thing, but I think it's more realistic revenue-wise to do something like that on a bigger scale. So I totally am for doing whatever we need to do to make sure that these businesses continue to, like I said, not thrive, just survive, as I'm trying to do with my business. And I'm not suggesting we do this as profit for my company. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to donate tables, chairs, whatever it is that I need to do to make sure that these businesses can survive the next few months.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Next caller is Jeffrey Weisinger.
Welcome, Jeffrey.
Hello. Thank you, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I am in downtown Paso right now. Just had a wonderful meal at BL Brasserie. I'm stepping away from BL Brasserie to walk around the downtown area. And when it comes to the idea of street closures, I have been opposed to it. However, now with the new changes that the state governments have put on us, I'm looking at other options. And I would like to talk about advocating for the idea of one-lane street closures, allowing certain businesses to be able to utilize the street. But I'd like the council to take into consideration that not every restaurant in our downtown area needs or is looking for street closures. There's really only a few restaurants that closing down the streets are going to benefit. And we need to make sure that we still have adequate parking and that we still have that sense of downtown by being able to drive around. So as I'm standing here right now on the corner of Pine Street and 12th Street, and the side of the street closest to the park, if there's a way we can have one-way traffic coming down there, but the side closest to, here we are at, this is Street Side restaurant. We have La Cosecha is down here. I know La Cosecha is a restaurant that could benefit from closing down part of the street. Again, with my business, Jeffrey's Wine Country Barbecue, we are located in the alley. If you close down Park Street and Pine Street, that's going to severely impact our business. We have folks that come in off of Pine Street, drive down the alley, pick up to-go food, take-out food, and then drive away. I know that Unagi would probably benefit from closing down Park Street, but I think it really needs to be identified as what businesses could benefit from this. We have Odyssey here. I know they don't have a great deal of outdoor seating, so they could probably benefit from something, but from some form of parking. But I think it has to do with identifying these businesses, and if the restaurant or business owners, hopefully a lot of them are on this call, if closing down the streets affects their business in a positive or a negative way, hopefully they're speaking up and advocating for it. But just to close down random streets in order to accommodate dining, the whole point of what we're trying to create is dine-in experience. What the city has done and what Stephen has done specifically with All About Events and creating the park situation is fantastic. It's been a great opportunity for people to come in and get takeout food and go and sit in the park. However, the issue that some of these restaurants and like I say, La Cosecha being here, El Cortile over there, Thomas Hill Organics, these are restaurants that thrive on dine-in experiences. So I just had dinner here at BL Bra. I thank you for your time, and I'd like to hear what everyone else has to say.
Thank you very much for calling. We appreciate it.
Next caller is Carol McDonald.
Very good. Welcome, Carol. Are you with us?
Yes, I am. How are you?
We are well.
Okay, I hope I'm concise in what I'm got to say. I've taken quite a few notes on what we're doing. Can you all hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay. Tonight, I know that the discussion was considered some of the things that some of the restaurants have done already. We've gone out on the sidewalks and stuff like that. We have suffered a lot in the past 4 months, being closed, being minimized, 40, 45%. You guys have heard from me way too many times, and I'm sure you're thinking, why is Carol calling? But I have a bunch of comments and questions, okay? The one-lane street closures is my preference, only because I think it is something something that's worked in many, 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 many cities. Yes, it may be a little bit harder to implement, but it does create an atmosphere where wineries, restaurants, everybody can be the same. And it would be a 24/7 operation, only because it would minimize the cost for the city labor costs, and it would allow many of the restaurants to do lunch and dinner, not just dinner. I may have joined this particular part of the meeting a little bit late because I have been working at one of the restaurants tonight. I was wondering if the permits would still be the cost of $2,000. With the addition of the sidewalks, if it were just sidewalk seating, what we went through tonight at one of my restaurants was insane. We have sidewalk seating. It is very, very spread out. It was probably one of the hardest nights I've ever had to work here. And it was just one of those things that just having us spread in a very far parameter is a very difficult way to do business. The next thing is, I think that, everybody's talking about the parking situation and minimizing the loss of parking. I think you should reconsider the fact that there are many businesses that have talked to you and said that they would give you their business that night, nights from 5 to 10 or whatever, and allow you to use their parking. And they're right downtown. And some of the businesses that won't actually put it in writing have said that it would be kind of an unofficial way. I know for a fact the bank across the street, Pacific Premier Bank, people park there all night long, and nothing is set. Okay, next thing, insurance, indemnification. Can people name you additionally insured, the city additionally insured? The time frame, I would love to see it 24/7. I would like to see it past the not foreclosure order, because we are at 45%. And I've been talking to you guys since Memorial Day about the fact that at 45%, we're at 45%. No matter how much business we do, we still do tax.
That's 3 minutes. Could you summarize for us, please?
Primarily, I love the idea of half-street parking. If it were parklets, I would say do parklets along the whole street, not just in front of each business. That way, the wineries, the restaurants, everybody that would be effective can use those spaces. Sorry if I took too long. I just had
Not
a lot
at
of
all.
notes.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. And it's very hard to get everything you have to say in 3 minutes sometimes. Thank you very much for calling. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Next caller is Stacy Jacob.
Good evening, Stacy.
Good evening, Mayor Martin and members of council. I first want to give you a very brief update on dining in the park, which as Stephen with All About Events, I have to give him a huge shout out and big thank you for donating all of the infrastructure for the tables, chairs, and umbrellas that you see in the park. His team has been absolutely amazing. We launched that program on Father's Day weekend, which was June 18th. It runs on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night. Every weekend, we have had an average of about 500 guests over the 4 nights. The 4th of July weekend was a record for us at 591 guests. People are just loving the area. I was in the park last week on Thursday night. I had a guest come up to me and say, "This is the best thing ever. Thank you so much." And they had already been there twice and were planning to return multiple times. I've got to believe that person must live here. So what I wanted to say is that that program is very successful. A huge shout out to Crew Hospitality and Patty Quelo and her team who have helped ensure safety, have helped with the experience in terms of hosting folks and getting them seated down. So much so, as Stephen had mentioned, the city of San Luis Obispo, or I should say downtown SLO, had called us asking us how we put that program together. So first of all, fantastic. I would just say with the latest order to close, would love for you to consider adding lunch and adding another day of the week into that program. We believe we have the funds and the staff to be able to do that if that was the will of the council. Back to street closures and the topic at hand tonight. I have been working with Darren and with Dave Athey in terms of that circulation of how we could look at things. I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of the restaurants downtown in terms of putting these things together. This issue has now been compounded with the fact that downtown tasting rooms also now can take advantage of this. You're talking about over 50 plus businesses that are going to be impacted and probably more with this recent order in place. So I actually really love the kind of modified parklet idea of moving into the the parking area so we can maintain the two-way traffic component. The other thing that we had started working on and are continuing to work on is, as Carol had mentioned, identifying those private businesses around the park. There's actually an agreement with the Chamber of Commerce and those businesses to allocate additional parking. So we are finding solutions for the parking challenge that is there. So we really believe Travel Paso, on behalf of Travel Paso, it is imperative that our tourism ecosystem, which downtown is the core of that, and granted, these policies you put in place could be executed and implemented citywide, but the downtown is the hub, and we ask for your approval to create these opportunities and modifications so our ecosystem can not only survive, but really help get through this next order.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next caller is Gina Fitzpatrick.
Welcome, Gina.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. Gina Fitzpatrick, President and CEO of the Paso Robles Chamber of Commerce. I'm speaking to support the proposal to temporarily maximize our space by using the streets in the downtown in a creative way in order to allow the restaurants and tasting rooms to utilize this space for outdoor seating. As you all know, the vast majority of our businesses have been severely impacted by COVID-19 pandemic. And at the same time, in true Paso tradition, the community has really rallied to support as many neighbors as they can and as often as they're able to. You have all shown courageous leadership as we have opened the enhanced park dining and met the challenges of new social distancing restrictions head on. We know that in order to consider the entire ecosystem, the health of our community, and what makes Paso Paso, we must continue to be bold and creative. Expanding the hours of our park dining program may be on the agenda in the future, but in the meantime, please strongly consider the use of our streets. I cannot emphasize enough, allowing our 50-plus restaurants and tasting rooms to continue operating means people are still gainfully employed. Revenue is being generated throughout, and this highly benefits our entire community. We have secured 10 additional parking spaces and are prepared to continue conversation with more local business owners that have parking spaces available for use by the public, which will help to make up for that lost space. Additionally, we've done our research and we asked the public to weigh in. In conclusion, approximately 80% of the respondents were supportive of temporary closures of select downtown streets for outdoor dining, tasting, retail, and pedestrian use. We have tents readily available and the ability to enhance the experience our visitors and locals desire. Our visitor center staff has received hundreds of calls in the past month, and we know firsthand that people are looking for a safe place to savor Paso Robles. So this proposal provides all of that and more. Unfortunately, with the infection rates increasing and anticipated summer surge upon us, our businesses face dire choices. If they're not able to expand their seating to downtown streets, they may have to close altogether. Now is the time to continue to support our downtown restaurants, tasting rooms, and retailers, and show the same leadership in responding to the challenges ahead with creativity and compassion. While the pandemic has created unprecedented challenges, this proposal is not. There are examples all over the world of how outdoor seating can transform streets into vibrant civic centers. From the grand squares of European cities to Times Square in New York, we've seen it all over. Street closures for outdoor seating create a sense of place that enhances the experience of our community members and our visitors. So on behalf of our board of directors and our members, thank you all for your continued leadership and service to our community in these difficult times.
Thank you.
Next caller is Christine Castillas.
Welcome, Christine.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Hanging in there.
Okay.
This is Kristen from, my husband and I own Orale Taqueria right downtown on 11th Street. And we are in favor of the partial street closures. We feel like that it's scalable. So as the state, as the governor says, dims on and off, we can do that as well. And it also keeps parking available for retail and also curbside pickup, which is important for us. We do a lot of dine-in, but we do a lot of pickup and to-go orders as well. And we also like the idea of having more 15-minute parking spots or 30-minute, whatever it is, just kind of that shorter time frame for those curbside pickups. Of the two partial street closure options, we prefer the one-lane street closure. As Carol mentioned, the barricades kind of create a more consistent experience. The idea of having it 24/7 is, fits the needs of all restaurants. So if we're doing lunch or dining, there's no towing. And then lastly, with the barricades, in my opinion, create a little bit more safety in the case that there were to be an accident. I also, consider the fantastic cruise nights that we have had downtown, and I think those plan to continue. And I can't imagine a cruise night with just a piece of rope between guests dining and all of the cars. So I think that's important to keep into consideration. Two other comments regarding the sidewalks. We'll take any space we can. Each table is really helpful, but it's the sidewalk option alone. It's just not enough. For us, we have 4 restaurants, eateries right there. So there's the Catch, there's Basil, and there's Cold Stone, and then there's us. And we all have really narrow kind of entryways, so we could maybe fit a table at best, and that's just really not enough. So, we'll take whatever we can get, but again, the one lane street closure would be much more beneficial. And then, as others have mentioned, there's really not space to social distance where we are. The sidewalk's just not wide enough. For the time frame, I would 100% echo what Carol said about going beyond when the time comes for us to allow indoor dining, because that is at a limited capacity. And while, we'll take, again, every seat we can get, we need to get back to 100%, not just 50. And that's it. I appreciate the time.
Very good. Thank you for your comments.
Next caller is Trevor LaSalle.
Welcome, Trevor.
Yeah. Hi, Steve. Thank you guys for taking my call, and thank you guys for taking the time to try to help these restaurants out and everyone associated. So I would just kind of want to give my 2 cents, and I would really appreciate anything we can get. I know the parklets are an option for us, but just the time and cost that it would take for us to do them is kind of extensive. And these new options you guys are kind of presenting with closing one lane or just doing kind of a modified parklet would be very helpful to kind of get something going quicker and faster for us. Any extra seating obviously is going to be helpful. So we just appreciate if you guys can act as quickly as possible. I know Newsom, made us close mid-shift. After our lunch, we had to close down for dinner. So if you guys can act as swiftly as he kind of acts, making us close down, be very appreciative so that we can get things in place and get procedures going as fast as possible. And we will follow your directive, of course. And again, thank you guys for taking the time to help us out where you can. And we want to be part of the solution of making this great for everyone, for the customers, and keep everyone safe. So again, thanks for taking the time.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Next caller is Heather Michalonis.
Welcome, Heather.
Hey, thanks, Mayor Martin. I appreciate your taking my time and appreciate all of you guys being here. I just wanted to speak to the parklets and the restaurants that are requesting that extra space. I think it sounds like a great idea. There's also retail spaces, tasting rooms, all the other businesses that are there. And I think it's important to consider the time frame that it's allowed to happen. There was mention of when does it end. I think it should be considered possibly to extend the end of the parklet time to be past the time when the state closure happens, just so that restaurants can possibly recoup some of the time that they've had to be closed for. And so that was just something that was that kind of struck me, was that these restaurants and other retail businesses and tasting rooms and everything might need a little extra time to increase their ability to accommodate more patrons, basically. So that's my comment, and I just want to thank all the downtown businesses and the city staff and people and everything for all the considerations. There's a lot of factors going in on this. So thank everybody for their time and consideration. And that's it.
Very good. Thank you for calling.
Yep. Bye-bye.
We have no other callers.
Okay. No other callers online. We're going to go ahead and close public comment. People we haven't heard from tonight include our public safety folks. I'd like to give the police department an opportunity to comment on the options and some of the pluses and minuses.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. Commander Davis here. Having worked in the parking world now for a while, I have a few concerns with what we have looked at with this plan, and we obviously want the downtown business to thrive as much as possible, but having seating on the streets without any type of physical barricade is not supported by us. So we have several events in our downtown, and we always close streets with physical barricades and put personnel at them because we want to make sure that no one can drive where people are sitting. That's of primary importance to us. Our proposal from the police department side was the one-way traffic because it does support that those hard closures and allows businesses to have a lot of room to utilize that. Actually, Julie with Dixon was here yesterday, and I have to admit, majority of this plan is probably her idea because she too has been around the parking world a lot right now, is watching what's going on. And she too showed us Los Gatos, which has done something similar to what we're looking at here. And that plan that's on the screen there, we walked it and counted the spaces yesterday and made sure there was only 2 ADA spots that were missing. So that's a plus. Additionally, the sidewalk tables that are happening now, as we've kind of noticed, it's not, as Councilman Hammond pointed out, it's kind of difficult for us to get by on some of the sidewalks. So that's been a concern for us. Additionally, if we've talked about the distancing requirements, that's just not enough space, as we've heard from some business owners that that's just not enough space to have your distancing and have that. We feel like the concrete barricades just provide the safety and give the businesses the amount of room, and it doesn't require a lot of overtime on our personnel to stand out there and to guard the barricades. The plan on the screen there was, we discussed with fire. It was changed a few times to make sure that it was open, that fire would have access to the front of the buildings and access to the alleyways so they can get to the taller buildings in the downtown. So I think it's, as far as the police department's concerned, we'd just like to make sure that there's probably something physical in the way of a vehicle driving where someone is sitting dining. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll bring it back to council for conversation, but before we go there, I want to answer a couple of questions. One person asked what the permitting fee will be. We had about a $2,000 fee on the parklets. How's that going to relate to this project?
Well, I think that's going to depend on what is decided or the direction that's given the staff. So if we do something similar to a parklet, there's the same indemnification, same contract, and everything else that goes with that. So it'd be a similar cost, probably a little less because there's less review of the plans, a little easier. And if the city decides to take on the task of closing down the parking lane, then council could set a lower number. Probably a lower number is justified because the city is closing down the parking lane or the half street. And then in that case, it would just be a function of staff time to collect and check the indemnification and insurance information. So $500, somewhere between $500 and $1,000.
Okay, and then a question again about how this would affect major events downtown, assuming that we are allowed to have parades again and things like that and car shows. What would happen in that event?
Well, definitely a half street closure would definitely affect the event. So they would have to follow the one-way street. The folks that watch the parade probably wouldn't be that affected because there's actually more space now, and you could put more people on the sidewalks in those parking areas on that in the half street closure. But it would certainly affect if they need a wide space, or let's just say, as you see on the screen there, 11th Street is one way in the wrong direction. Actually, it wouldn't matter because you close the streets down, but it would just be a tighter space in there, and it could affect what they want to do.
Yeah, I'm thinking large farm equipment here. So
yeah.
Okay, those are the questions that I had. Let's start off with council discussion. Councilman Hammond.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I don't know, with my opinion only, and with the current Democratic administration of the state and other states that are democratically held, that I think truly they're using their power to control, especially in an election year, basically avoiding data and science, especially in San Luis Obispo County, to make us conform to things that they want to do rather than thinking of our businesses and our school children and all that. Again, I was opposed to street closures, but given their posture and what they're bringing down to us, I'm open at this point. However, looking at especially this item, slide number 7, with the yellow marks that we show there around the park, I'm curious that we have the park public area for them to use. And if we were to put more tables there, I think we would not have to reduce traffic on 12th, 11th, and Pine in those areas. I'm kind of curious of how many restaurants would really, and I think we're speaking of restaurants here more than businesses, but how many of those would require or want to have parking space take up? In other words, that's kind of where I'm thinking, if we're going to do anything in the street, it would be within a parking space, not really reducing traffic flow. Although, again, I'm with Caleb. moving cars, with people sitting down a few feet away is just backwards at this point. But the other thing I'm wondering about too, if we do something like that, I vision it to be at a certain time of the day. In other words, like say, for instance, from 5 to 9 during the dinner hours, that restaurants could take part of our street and, rope it off, so to speak. I would highly recommend that we first do the sidewalk issue, though. Kind of like what I saw there at 13th, with Fish Gaucho. They're making use of the street, spreading out their tables, still trying to get as many people to come. And I think that's exactly what we need to do with a city policy to allow public area to be used temporarily during these times where the state mandate is in force. As soon as those restrictions are lifted, then we go back to, a normal posture. But we've got to make, areas and space available that publicly owned to keep our restaurants open, but still, again, not to affect other businesses. That's why I'm saying I'm thinking this more in the evening time where most businesses are shut down. Their main prime time is during the day. So that would be my thought. Sidewalk area is okay. Avoiding 12th Pine and 11th around the park. At this point, this is, I think, something we should just try first and maybe adjust, but getting in to make some sort of a vehicle policy that will keep more space available for our restaurants is really the goal here, I believe. So allowing them to continue is really the whole point of this, keep the business operations going downtown. So, I'll stand by for further discussion, but that's it for right now.
Thank you. Mr. Strong.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, I try to keep in mind that we hold nonpartisan positions, so I don't want to get partisanship into this. And I respect the fact that we have a constitution and a system of government that is the will of the majority with respect for the minority's rights. And therefore, I have to respect whatever administration the voters of the jurisdiction have put in place, whether I agree with them or not. That's the will of the people. So in that vein, and in the vein of what the police department has said, I was starting to go with the staff recommendation because I could see that would be less cost for public works especially. But after hearing from the police department, it would appear that the extra cost for the public works department might be more than offset by the reduced cost for the police department. So I'm starting to now favor the half street closure idea. And if so, I think we should just do it across the board for all those that are listed there, plus the ones all the way up to 14th Street. And mainly because everybody should be treated as equally as possible. Now, for the rest of the city, where we have unusual situations with them, I like the staff recommendation of just letting them use some of the parking area, and without having to actually go to the heavy expense of doing the parklet, all that parklet special construction. We're here. We want to save our businesses. And we're here to not only save the businesses, but save the jobs that they provide, and save our citizens and give them a better way of life. And tourism gives them a better way of life by keeping their taxes lower by adding those tourism dollars in to pay for some of our services. So with all of that, I'm kind of looking at a hybrid myself. And I want to keep this as nonpartisan and just what's the best thing for our city and our businesses, period. Thank you.
Thank you. Maria?
Yes, sir. I'm the same with Fred. I was going more with the parking lane closure. And then the commander and the police department came in, and I can see how this is more of a safety issue, having the physical barriers and doing the half street closure. When he started talking about that, it reminded me of couple of events that were outdoor. I think it was in Austin, Texas, that they were having outdoor dining, and a car just kind of drove through there and had some incidents there. So, you know, now I'm thinking more safety wise. I know that they've been having cruise night downtown. I think it's on Friday evenings. So that definitely is a safety issue for me. Again, you know, we just got to come up with something to help the businesses, of course. That's all for me, sir.
Thank you very much. For me, I started off being opposed to the street closures. My hope was that, and at that time we were looking forward to the county reopening, and that hopefully we would be able to keep that infection curve flattened and the reopening would move forward into ensuing phases. And I was hoping we'd be able to work our way out of that. Obviously, with the governor's most recent announcement, we've taken a step back now with no real path forward to reopen. And I put myself in the place of business people who get treated sort of like electric light bulbs. We turn the switch on, we turn the switch off. That sounds good, looks good on paper, but in the real world, it's very costly and in many cases impossible. So I've come around to this idea that we need to increase the capacity for our restaurants and other businesses in the downtown area. So the devil is always in the details, and we have several options in front of us. And I think we've always said that public safety comes first. So even though it is more expensive, I think we have to look at ways to put more substantial barriers between motor traffic and diners. I don't want to see, by accident or for any other reason, a car plowing into a table full of diners. I don't think that would be good for anybody. Also, I think it's going to have to be fairly well permanent during the duration of use, because while restaurants may operate between 5 and 9, anybody that's worked in a restaurant realizes you don't just open the door and start serving people. You have to set up tables, you have to get the food prepared ahead of time, and then afterwards there's tons of cleanup. And so you're talking about extended hours just to make that area work for restaurants. As far as the fees, it seems like they're going to be smaller than they would have been for the parklet, and I would be in favor of, yes, charging the fees, but deferring them until after this period is over. So that way people would be able to get in to the situation without having to front that money, but then when the whole thing is over, we'll be able to collect at that time. I think also I'd be willing to consider, as far as an ending for this, looking at a 30 to 60 day window after the closures are lifted at the state level, so that there would be a chance for recouping for the restaurants for the difficulty they've gone through so far. So those are my suggestions. We have a recommendation in front of us to direct staff to continue working with downtown businesses and other stakeholders to develop a pilot program for downtown street closures. So I would invite
Mr.
a motion.
Mayor?
Mr. Strong.
Yeah, one thing I want to ask, I agree with basically what you were saying, but I'm wondering one thing, and that is I think the state gave us some guidelines where if we move into the next phase, the phase we were in prior to this, that we have to be in there for a certain length of time before they'll let full opening happen. Can somebody tell me how long that time period is? Because that's how long I think we should probably keep this in force.
Yeah, I cannot. Mr. Frucci, any idea on that?
I'd ask Sarah Johnson-Rios, as she's most expert on the state's guidelines.
If I heard the question correctly, it was, do we know how long these current closures are going to be in effect? And we do not.
No. The question is, once we go back to where we were prior to these current closures, how long do we have to maintain that before we can go into full opening?
Yeah, we don't actually have information like that. The governor so far hasn't described where we're going from here in terms of reopening again, unfortunately.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that is a complication. And of course, I think as everyone listening knows, who has been following the news, the numbers of infections in our zip code 93446 make up about half of all the infections in the North County. So I think that going forward, it's even more unsure than it's been in the past. My expectation, my fear is we're going to see 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and it just creates an entire atmosphere of inconsistency and unpredictability for these businesses. So I think we need to move ahead and, to the greatest extent possible, mitigate that. So.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
The other thing question I had is how do we put together a motion that's kind of a hybrid, because it should apply to the entire city, no matter what restaurants they're or where they're located, that they can use some of the sidewalks, some of the street space, and the method by which they do it. Maybe we somehow have to work that out with staff or give them a general policy that then they can follow and allow this to happen. I agree with you on either deferring the fee and or keeping it really low, like only a couple of $100 and not $500 or $1,000.
Yes. So what I would recommend is making a motion to accept the recommendation of staff with those particular points. First of all, that the permit fees, which would reflect the actual cost, it's not something we adjust arbitrarily, but would reflect the actual cost of doing this, would be deferred until such time as pandemic restrictions are lifted, that there be I'm going to say a 30-day window after those restrictions are lifted that the restaurants can continue to operate in this fashion, try to recoup losses, that the option that we select to pursue would be the one that calls for half-street closures with safety barriers. And that I would also add that we want to try this, and if we have to adjust it, and I'll just say this, if we have to adjust something for Pioneer Day or something like that, we're going to do that on an ad hoc basis to make sure that we are able to protect those events. Those would be the things that I would list as points for staff to consider as they move forward with our recommendation.
I'll second that as a motion if it's your motion.
I'll make the motion. I have a motion from myself, seconded by Mr. Strong. Is there further discussion, Mr. Hammond?
Yes, I would try to add some way to get staff to get the sidewalk permit available as soon as possible. Again, I see an exposure to the city out there without them being allowed to do it. They're doing it. You follow? So I'm thinking right now, if we can throw an email to everybody downtown that if they wish to do this, get their application in so that we can get permitting done.
So I will add to my motion that people are notified that this isn't being put in process. Anything that's been organized outside of this process has to cease. Is that what you're saying?
Well, essentially, I want to make sure that they have the opportunity to continue. It's important at this point in time, but we need to also cover the citizens, through liability.
Okay. So rather than saying it has to cease, it has to comply.
Yes.
Second, accept.
Okay. So
sir, one thing, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Do we need to add for staff? Do we need to add about the 15-minute parking areas? Do we need to add that in our motion?
I mean for that to be included because it was part of the presentation. Anybody have a problem with that?
No. I think staff will be coming back with that recommendation for future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Frucci.
Thank you, Your Honor. You indicated as part of your motion that we would adjust this on an ad hoc basis for special circumstances such as the parade. Was that designating that it would need to come back to council for the ad hoc adjustment, or that staff could do it as these special events arise? My
intent is that staff could do it. Any problem with that from the council?
No.
Second agrees.
No.
We're good on that. Anything else, Mr. Frucci?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Motion by the mayor, second by Mr. Strong. All discussion has been accounted for. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Martin,
Aye.
Councilmember Strong,
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia,
Aye.
Councilmember Hammond,
Aye.
and Councilmember Gregory has recused himself.
Right. So the motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much. We have nothing for council comments tonight. You want to tell Mr. Gregory he can come back in the room if he wants to? Are you still hanging out there?
I'm not sure. I'll see real quick.
Okay. Is there anyone that has something to throw in at the end here, Mr. Strong? Mr. Hammond. Mr. Hammond?
He's saying if Mr. Gregory can come back in the room.
Oh, okay. John, are you with us now?
Yeah, it doesn't appear that he's in the lobby, so he probably gone home.
Okay. Do you have any closing comments?
No, other than, some of the meetings I went to senior advisory, nothing really to report, but let's pick it up again next Tuesday.
You got it.
Yeah,
Councilwoman
no,
Garcia?
I went to meetings.
Yeah.
I went to meetings too, but I didn't see that on our agenda, so I'm not going to.
No, it's not there, but I know that sometimes folks have pressing things they want to toss in at the end. So, Councilwoman Garcia?
No, sir. Thank you.
Very good. If there's no further business, Mr. Frucci,
No, sir, no further business.
entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Hammond, second by Councilman Strong. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed?